Ilya realizes she is suddenly trapped in a cruel time loop, returning to the exact same point in time while everyone else remains completely oblivious. Suspended in a dark void of shattered memories, she alone bears the heavy burden of reliving this tragic scenario over and over again. Her fragmented recollections always violently surface right at this idyllic tea party, heralded by a young girl eagerly greeting her new big brother, Soleil. Looking at the impossibly vast distance already forming between them, Ilya knows it is far too late to change the course of various impending tragedies. Soleil warmly greets his new little sister, gently teasing her for using the title of Big Brother so prematurely. Watching their tender interaction, Ilya accepts the painful, inevitable truth that Soleil will ultimately fall deeply in love with her sister. When a sudden clink of a teacup draws their attention, Ilya hurriedly excuses herself by claiming she feels a little unwell. Begging to take her leave, she shrinks under Soleil's cold stare, finding absolutely no kindness in eyes that silently demand she endure the gathering a while longer. Knowing they won't buy her weak excuse since Sylvia is the truly fragile one, Ilya mentally notes that Soleil has never once looked at her with such tender concern. Sylvia, her delicate and incredibly kind little sister, gasps in surprise but quickly agrees to let her go. A loyal servant steps up, deeply concerned for his milady's condition, but Ilya dismisses him with a polite thanks and insists she is merely under the weather. Left behind amongst the blooming roses, Soleil and Sylvia share a radiant, picture-perfect moment of pure joy. Reflecting on her own engagement to Soleil, Ilya wonders why this deeply familiar sight still manages to fill her with such crushing despair every single time. She recalls the jarring day her father arranged the match, leaping 8 social ranks to betroth her to the first-ranked Marquis's son after his original fiancé tragically died. The sudden, crushing weight of high-ranking noble responsibilities slammed into her young shoulders the moment her father demanded her absolute compliance. Falling deeply in love with the boy, young Ilya desperately screened her surroundings to become his perfect partner, fiercely driving away any potential rivals. Riddled with toxic insecurities, she lashed out and fretted constantly that someone much worthier would come along and steal his heart. She painfully realized she lacked the slender grace and striking beauty to surpass the elegant women naturally drawn to Soleil's magnetic presence. Gripped by sheer panic, Ilya sensed with terrifying clarity that if she didn't take drastic action, he would be stolen away forever. Snapping back to the harsh present, gossiping girls eagerly point out that her younger sister and Lord Soleil are spending time together yet again. As the aristocratic whispers swell, Ilya chooses to completely ignore the couple, refusing to even walk over and greet her own fiancé. By all societal rules, a betrothed man shouldn't be alone with another woman, but him keeping company with his fiancé's younger sister creates a highly convenient loophole. Her peers praise Lady Ilya as an incredibly tolerant person, using the excuse of impending family ties as a total pardon for the couple's blatant closeness. Rejecting the label of tolerant in her mind, Ilya is suddenly confronted by Sylvia, whom she personally persuaded their strict parents to let attend this very academy. The bright-eyed Sylvia innocently asks about having lunch with him, completely eager to know what Lord Soleil is like at school. Staring blankly into her teacup, Ilya bitterly admits to herself that she has absolutely no idea what her own fiancé is truly like. No matter how many times her cursed life loops, Soleil never speaks to her at school or introduces his friends, leaving her with zero information to share. Unlike her aggressively jealous past self, this looping Ilya actively encouraged her sister to attend the academy with her, teaching Sylvia how to bypass their parents' strict objections. Sighing deeply, she realizes it is simply unbearable to stand on the sidelines doing nothing while the exact same heartbreaking events play out. Praised for her kindness, Ilya silently waits for the explosive, dramatic development that will inevitably ignite now that she has deliberately pushed the two lovers together. Refusing the gentle praise, Ilya silently rejects the notion that she is the kind one. She acknowledges that Marianne, with her lovely appearance and first-ranked Earl pedigree, is far more suited to Soleil than she ever could be. Confronting Marianne immediately about the rumors of her pursuing Soleil, Ilya is shocked when the girl simply giggles and politely promises not to come between two mutually in-love people. Instead of issuing a formal complaint as a higher-ranking noble normally would, a smiling Marianne kindly shifts the topic by asking about Ilya's fiancé. Realizing Marianne actually loves another noble, Ilya immediately trusts her as the girl excitedly offers to share recent gossip regarding Soleil. Ilya reflects that in all her previous lives, they were always bitter rivals who never shared such a warm exchange. A sharp discrepancy in her looping timelines has unexpectedly turned someone like Marianne into her very best friend. Even trapped in a repeating life, everyone gradually evolves into different people who aren't forced to replicate their past actions. Despite these shifting timelines, Soleil's tender, unwavering love for Sylvia remains the solitary, cruel constant. Tragically, the intense feelings Ilya harbors for Soleil also remain completely unchanged. If this were a tragic fairy tale meant to tug at audience heartstrings, her pitiful sister falling for a forbidden fiancé would definitely be the beloved protagonist. Unfortunately, this heartbreaking narrative is not purely fictitious, but the very real story of Ilya's looping life. Crushed by isolation, she wonders why absolutely nobody understands her agonizing pain. A haunting voice questions why she is the only one bearing the weight of these supposed truths. The mysterious query demands to know why Ilya alone keeps traversing this same painful wrinkle in time. Recalling her hellish first life, Ilya remembers how Soleil would always watch the smiling Sylvia with a heated, passionate gaze. Despite knowing him for some time, that visceral moment was the very first time she had ever seen him look at someone with such burning intensity. Desperate to become worthy of his love, she sacrificed all her waking hours mastering cultural refinement, academics, and territorial management. Clenching her jaw, she painfully endured those relentless hardships for years on end. The bitter memories shatter her composure, spilling her tea as she demands to know why things must be this way. An utterly confused Sylvia asks what she is talking about, prompting Ilya to fiercely ask if Soleil looks at her with those same heated eyes. Trembling with suppressed rage and heartbreak, Ilya invokes Lord Soleil's name. Sylvia nervously insists she knows he is her sister's fiancé, but Ilya violently rejects the innocent defense. Accusing her sister of feigning ignorance while constantly stealing him away, Ilya finally snaps and screams Sylvia's name in pure frustration. A furious Soleil immediately intervenes, shielding the cowering Sylvia and harshly demanding that a cruel Ilya be ashamed of her unhinged outburst. He sharply rebukes Ilya, pointing out that she has completely frightened her younger sister. Enduring the embarrassing, judgmental whispers of high society, Ilya realizes her explosive jealousy was the exact catalyst that finally pushed the two lovers closer together. Although her total loss of self-control earned her harsh beratement and Soleil's absolute disgust, their political engagement remained intact. Waking to her maid's morning greetings, Ilya bitterly notes she is still the one raised and most suited to become the next Marchioness. Discovering that Soleil is avoiding her yet again, she stares blankly out the window, noting that 2 agonizing years have flown by since that disastrous tea party. After graduating from the academy and tying the knot, Ilya barely sees Soleil, but he plays the part of an ideal husband now that he is a full-fledged knight. When Soleil politely checks in on her health, his apparent concern lifts Ilya's spirits as she smiles and assures him she is perfectly fine. However, as the quiet years slowly pass, Ilya finds herself unable to ignore a painful truth she is deeply loath to admit. Staring into her husband's face, she realizes with crushing clarity that his eyes are completely devoid of any warmth whenever he looks at her. Stepping outside, a beaming Sylvia greets them brightly, warmly welcoming Lord Soleil and noting that it has been a long time since they last met. A yawning chasm opens in Ilya's heart as Soleil smiles back at Sylvia, casually agreeing that it has been a while and complimenting her good health. Everything from his heated gaze and gentle gestures to his overall demeanor completely transforms around Sylvia, displaying a tender affection he has never once shown Ilya. Soleil eagerly invites Sylvia to partake in her favorite confectionaries he specially brought for her, prompting the younger girl to happily agree. Whenever a tea party is held, Ilya feels obliged to make amends for her past misconduct, thanking Sylvia while Soleil gently brushes a stray petal from the younger girl's hair. Shocked by the deeply intimate gesture, Ilya stares blankly as Soleil casually points out the petal and Sylvia nervously stammers out her thanks. Clenching her dress tightly, Ilya desperately commands herself to remain calm, knowing she simply cannot afford to make the mistake of losing her composure a second time. When Ilya carefully thanks him for always being so kind to her sister, Soleil merely chuckles and replies that it is only natural since they are family. Sylvia innocently praises Ilya for being truly blessed with such a caring husband, leaving Ilya to force out a brief agreement while hiding her crushing misery. From an outsider's perspective, Ilya appears incredibly privileged, boasting the prestige, wealth, and status of a marquis's wife alongside a splendid knight. And yet, Ilya bitterly acknowledges that she had sadly fooled herself into believing she was truly married to Soleil in anything but name. She never actually imagined he would agree when she suggested they dine together, leading to a tense, quiet dinner filled with the clinking of silverware. Suffering sharp opprobrium over her seeming barrenness, Ilya suggests Soleil shouldn't push himself to exhaustion, to which he tiredly agrees out of apparent consideration. Having gone all out with the day's preparations by decorating the room and coordinating with the head chef, Ilya feels satisfied just being able to gaze upon his face. Hoping he might notice her small, affectionate gestures, she even picked out a brand new tablecloth for the occasion. Suddenly, a servant bursts into the dining room, apologizing for the intrusion but insisting he has an urgent matter to bring to his master's attention. Ilya glances at Soleil, assuming it must be a matter of great import as a look of utter shock and horror washes over his face. Utterly bewildered by his devastating expression, Ilya freezes as Soleil slowly turns his head and ominously declares that it was her. A profound, terrifying chill settles over the room as Ilya lets out a confused gasp. With a violent crash, Soleil whips around, brandishing his dinner knife at a flinching Ilya as he snarls her name in a blind rage. A servant desperately grabs Soleil to stop him from attacking, but Soleil ignores him entirely, screaming at Ilya that she killed Sylvia. Demanding to be unhanded, Soleil writhes in the servant's grip while the messenger formally reports that Lady Sylvia was attacked by an unidentified crew. The messenger finishes his grim report, confirming that the horrific carriage attack ultimately cost Lady Sylvia her life. Stunned by the news that the girl who stole her husband's heart is dead, a dark thought crosses Ilya's mind as she wonders if Soleil will finally look at her now. Her twisted hope shatters instantly as Soleil glares at her with pure hatred, roaring that he knew she was the one who murdered her. Horrified by her own fleeting thoughts, Ilya cries out that he is wrong, realizing that despite their bitter rivalry, Sylvia was still her precious younger sister. A haunting memory surfaces of a solemn vow to protect that fragile child in fulfillment of her sacred duty as an older sister. The phantom image of Soleil's enraged face flashes in her mind as he vehemently screams that he will never forgive her. Jolting violently back to reality at the tea table, she staggers backward and accidentally yanks the pristine tablecloth. The delicate teacup plummets to the ground, shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces across the floor. Breathing heavily, she gingerly clenches the fabric of her dress while trying to process the sudden rush of terror. Desperation clawing at her chest, her mind screams for someone to tell him she is innocent and had absolutely nothing to do with it. A harrowing vision overtakes her as she finds herself staring at cracked walls, hopelessly wondering how long she has been locked in this dreary cell. A ruthless guard coldly steps to the iron bars, informing her that the captured bandits confessed she instigated the deadly ambush. Refusing to believe such an absurd story, she realizes this blatant frame-up must be the handiwork of someone coveting her position as the next Marchioness. Trapped in the dark and completely stripped of her noble power, all she can do is drop to her knees and desperately pray to the heavens. Clinging to a fragile sliver of hope, she reassures herself of her innocence and firmly believes Soleil will arrive to retrieve her. Coughing weakly in the damp dungeon, she stubbornly holds onto the unwavering faith that her beloved fiancé will save her. The grim realization hits her that she has no memory of an execution, meaning she almost certainly perished and rotted away in that mildew-reeking squalid cell. The crushing truth dawns on her that this entire world revolves around Sylvia, to the point where even their own parents callously abandoned Ilya. Hearing the final hollow clatter of her tragic end, she resigns herself to the cruel reality that her death was just an inconsequential footnote in this fairy tale. Snapping completely back to the present moment, she sits frozen and wide-eyed in the sunlit garden. The deafening crash of porcelain echoes endlessly in her ears, violently marking the jarring moment her second life begins. Her younger sister immediately leans in with wide, innocent eyes, deeply concerned and asking if something is the matter. A dizzying montage of the idyllic tea party flashes before her eyes, blurring the terrifying lines between her past trauma and her present reality. Her heart delivers a violent thump as Soleil stares at her erratic behavior with mild bewilderment. As he calls out her name, the harrowing memories of her doomed past life completely flood her mind in an unstoppable, suffocating wave. Frantically denying the impossible truth, she forces herself to pull it together just as she is meant to introduce Sylvia to Soleil for the very first time. Soleil steps close and gently catches her shaking shoulders to steady her, noting with a soft smile that she seems somewhat different today. A horrifying phantom image of his enraged face furiously accuses her of murdering Sylvia, violently piercing right through his current gentle facade. Trembling under his touch, she realizes the visions are far too vivid to be a mere dream, leaving her terrified of what they truly mean. Ignoring the dark warnings echoing from her past self, she formally introduces her little sister to the man who once condemned her to rot. Her inner voice screams in utter desperation from the darkness, fiercely commanding her that she absolutely must not fail this second chance. Forcing down her paralyzing trauma, she commands herself to mask her terror, forgive the past, and plaster on a flawless smile. Squeezing her trembling hands, she reassures herself that she can manage this encounter as she quietly watches the fated pair stand before her. With cold determination burning in her eyes, she vows to tread carefully and absolutely never cause the fatal stir that ruined her previous life. Ilya weeps and vows never again. She confirms she has been cooped up inside the mansion all this time. Sylvia notes that her body is rather frail. A hand twitches near Ilya. Ilya observes he can touch her without batting an eye but still yearns for Sylvia. Clenching her hand to avoid falling apart, she resolves to fix her past mistakes to avoid his hatred. She is completely aware of everything set to transpire from this day forward. Armed with this knowledge, she intends to actively make choices for a happy life despite hearing about a chance encounter in town. Sylvia insists being taken by surprise was truly a coincidence. Ilya realizes Soleil visited Sylvia behind her back, marking the start of unexperienced events. Despite taking opposite paths, new incidents unfold as if spurred by an irresistible force. It feels like an undefiable fate where the two are always thinking of each other. Soleil laughing at Sylvia's high spirits makes Ilya feel a deep sense of resignation. She wonders if her shadowy existence holds any meaning while she recites disjointed passages and conceals her true feelings. Marrying Soleil just like in her first life makes her question if she is truly living her own life. Rumors spread that Earl Bloa is charged with embezzlement and Lady Ilya set the trap. Whispers question if he was framed by the scary madam as she forces herself to be strong. Arriving as the Marquis's wife, Ilya receives praise for her highly impressive recent activities. Told she is perfectly suited for the position, she accepts she has no choice but to be strong. She cannot show weakness or else Soleil will lose faith and others will trip her up. Her past self lacked resilience and naturally hid behind others. She must superficially change herself even if it removes her from the child Soleil originally loved. A sudden rustle interrupts as someone calls her name. Cornering the bandits who previously attacked Sylvia, she discovers the incident was not premeditated. Realizing enemies used Sylvia's death to ensnare her, she secretly dispatches guards and orders Sylvia to stay inside. She remains determined to change the flow of events. To divert the unrelenting current, she begs Lord Soleil to keep the frail Sylvia company in her stead. Trembling with reluctance, she entrusts Sylvia to the only man she trusts despite wanting to keep him. Panicking over her trembling hands, she worries he will find it odd since he must be thinking of Sylvia. She accepts it is fine even if he is looking right through her. Staring out the window as dawn breaks, Ilya desperately hopes Sylvia is safe and sound since no tragic messages have arrived. Pacing anxiously through the quiet halls, she silently begs Lord Soleil to hurry back as the sudden clatter of horse hooves shatters the morning silence. Flinging the heavy doors open, Ilya frantically demands to know Sylvia's condition before even asking the startled servant about Lord Soleil's whereabouts. To her immense shock, the servant reveals that Sylvia's condition has finally stabilized after Lord Soleil spent the entire night watching over her room. Overwhelming relief washes over Ilya as she violently collapses to the stone floor, ignoring the panicked cries of her startled maids. The entire household breathes a collective sigh of relief, murmuring their shared gratitude that the young girl survived the harrowing ordeal. Smiling through her lingering tears, Ilya tightly clutches her chest and rejoices that all her desperate efforts to change fate were not in vain. Remembering Sylvia's bright smile and eager book recommendations, Ilya triumphantly declares that she has finally broken free from the repeating cycle of tragedy. Cherishing the warm memory of promising to read together, Ilya embraces the profound hope that a bright, shared future finally awaits them. Filled with newfound conviction, she earnestly believes this timeline marks the true beginning of her life where she will faithfully fulfill her wifely duties beside Soleil. An idyllic vision of holding a newborn baby alongside a smiling Soleil blazes in her mind as she vows to build a real, loving family. The hopeful illusion instantly shatters as a frantic messenger bursts through the dining room doors, screaming Lady Sylvia's name in sheer panic. Springing from her seat in terror, Ilya demands to know what is wrong with her sister as dark clouds seemingly gather over the sprawling estate. Instead of answering, the trembling servant cautiously bypasses Ilya and hands a heavily sealed letter directly to a stunned Lord Soleil. Recognizing her own family crest stamped on the wax, Ilya questions why her husband is receiving correspondence explicitly meant for her bloodline. Violently shaking off her rising suspicion, she forces herself to ignore the blatant protocol breach and focus entirely on Sylvia's well-being. Her heart plummets into her stomach as she overhears the horrifying revelation that Sylvia's condition has deteriorated just hours after her brush with death. A blinding terror overtakes Ilya as she realizes the grim specter of death is still stubbornly clinging to her precious younger sister. Rising abruptly from the table with a hardened gaze, Soleil swiftly announces his immediate departure to check on Sylvia's worsening condition. Desperate to join him, Ilya instantly volunteers to pack light and travel together, but Soleil coldly orders the servants to prepare without her. Refusing to be left behind, she clenches her fists and loudly demands to accompany him, furious that he treats his solitary departure as a given. Meeting her desperate gaze with an impenetrable stare, Soleil silently challenges her right to intervene in the escalating family crisis. Dismissing her frantic pleas to ride alongside him, Soleil brutally points out her trembling hands and orders her to take a carriage like a fragile outsider. Screaming for him to wait, Ilya watches in agonizing slow motion as her husband carelessly abandons her in her darkest hour of need. A stern butler physically blocks her path, calmly offering to prepare a carriage while she uselessly screams Lord Soleil's name at his retreating back. Crushed beneath the weight of his absolute rejection, Ilya realizes with chilling clarity that his cold tone perfectly mirrors the day he announced Sylvia's previous death. Paralyzed by the suffocating trauma of the past, she watches history violently repeat itself as the gap between them widens just like before. Hot tears drip down her face as a sudden, sickening question pierces her despair, wondering why her family's urgent letter was addressed directly to her husband. Realizing her protocol-obsessed parents would never commit such a blatant breach of noble etiquette, she deduces that Soleil must routinely receive secret correspondence from her family. Uncovering the devastating implication that the secret sender can only be someone deeply connected to him, Ilya fiercely resolves that she absolutely must go after them. Staggering through the grand halls, she clutches her head dizzily as her panicked maids gasp in shock. As she collapses onto the hard floor, the maids scream out for their madam, while her vision fades with the desperate thought of going to that child's side. Regaining consciousness in bed, she chastises herself for being so utterly shameless, realizing her thoughts aren't with her gravely ill sister, but instead yearning to be with Soleil. The memory of his eyes makes his true feelings painfully clear. He doesn't wish to be disturbed, having once again chosen her little sister. In the dark past, she behaved horribly when Sylvia died, ultimately losing Soleil because he didn't want her encroaching on his time with Sylvia. Returning to reality, she calls herself pathetic for collapsing before calmly commanding the maids to leave the room so she can speak with the doctor in private. As the doors shut, the doctor stands gravely beside her bed, questioning why she requested a private audience. Staring intensely at her, he delivers the shocking news: she is with child. Her eyes widen in pure shock, completely stunned by the monumental revelation. She grips the bedsheets tightly, demanding he repeat his words, realizing this news is what she had desperately prayed for across 2 lifetimes. The heavy realization hits her that she is carrying the next successor to the marquisate, fulfilling her duty and her dream of building a family with Soleil. However, instead of the joyous blessings she had imagined, the doctor coldly states he will immediately inform Lord Soleil. Panic surges through her as she furiously orders him not to tell him, crying out that now is definitely not a good time. Rejecting his logical arguments about her husband being a source of support, she knows Soleil will undoubtedly be filled with regret because he is busy mourning Sylvia's failing health. A cruel memory resurfaces of Soleil solemnly stating it is their duty to produce an heir, treating it purely as a cold obligation. Gripping the sheets, she begs the doctor to keep quiet until her second trimester, terrified that Soleil would deny the existence of the child out of frustration. In the lonely present, she stares blankly ahead, bitterly wondering why Soleil is completely absent while she is suffering here alone. The crushing reality is that he won't choose her this time around either, even though Sylvia is currently at death's door. Drowning in despair, she wonders where she went wrong, remembering how her sheer terror of losing him spurred her to work so hard not to be hated. Suddenly shaking off her dark thoughts, she turns to her loyal attendant Al and points out that he still calls her Milady. Al places a hand over his heart and respectfully declares that she will always be Milady to him. A week has passed since Sylvia fell ill, and Soleil continues his vigil at her bedside, completely refusing to recognize Ilya as his wife. Plagued by severe morning sickness, her head throbs terribly, leaving her in no condition to ride a carriage to her parents' house, even though she knows she should. Despite knowing an ordinary big sister would go, she admits she cannot face Sylvia with Soleil at her side because she fears her eyes will betray her true, ugly thoughts. As she wallows in self-pity, an inner voice sharply asks if she is still alive and demands to know why she is giving up. Finding a sliver of resolve, she calls out to Al, asking him to step closer because she has a favor to ask. Raising a trembling hand toward him, she asks the hesitant knight if he could please hold her hand. Taken aback, Al stammers in surprise, clearly unsure of how to react to such an intimate request from his mistress. Dropping her hand back to her side, she sighs softly, admitting to herself that she knew she was asking for too much. A desperate voice questions how much longer she must persevere. Recalling her horrific first life, Ilya remembers a guard violently rattling her cell bars, demanding to know if Al was her accomplice since she couldn't have carried out the embezzlement plan alone. Haunted by the memory that her actions caused a loyal knight's death, this looping Ilya deliberately kept her distance from Al to protect him. This time around, false allegations of his involvement were easily explained away, allowing her to safely ask Al to stay by her side without holding her hand. Leaning in respectfully, Al tells his milady to feel free to disregard his silly musings because she knows she mustn't get him entangled in her doomed life. Chuckling softly, Al points out the unpleasant truth that she is essentially telling him to do the exact opposite if she so desires. Kneeling before her bed, Al swears he will offer his hand to her at any given time. Reaching out to touch her hand, he promises it is hers for as long as she truly wishes for it. Ilya realizes he is willingly offering to abandon his pride, lay down his sword, and exist solely for her sake. Clenching her hand, she understands he would let his arduous path and past efforts be all for naught just for her. Knowing this, Ilya dismisses his heartfelt vow as silly musings. She knows she could never drag a kind soul like him into a fugitive life, where they would have zero chance of survival making enemies of a powerful marquisate. She had already made up her mind during her childhood to hold onto the dream of becoming Soleil's wife. Fully aware of how foolish the notion is, she mumbles an apology to Al, still clinging to the fleeting hope for a blissful future with Soleil. Approaching the mansion, her mother frantically begs her to come see Sylvia, pleading for forgiveness for dismissing her previous earnest resolutions as pure hogwash. Stepping inside, Ilya learns Sylvia doesn't have much time left but has somehow recovered enough to sit up in bed. Finding it a bizarre exchange, she recalls Soleil asking her to go see Sylvia when he returned from work, noting that as the older sister, she should have been the one imploring her husband to let her comfort her dying sibling. Ilya admits her health has vastly improved, but she truly didn't want to visit if she could help it. Unsure of what expression to make, she hesitates outside the door as Sylvia coughs weakly inside. Panting softly, Sylvia looks up and calls for her big sister. Clenching her hands, Ilya apologizes, noting that despite being much weaker and thinner, Sylvia still looks as beautiful as ever. Ilya's heart pounds violently as Sylvia confesses she is in love with Lord Soleil. Repeating Lord Soleil's name, Ilya's heart continues to race. She recalls a past encounter where she tried to tell a rushed Soleil she was pregnant with his child. Hearing the news, his only response was a cold acknowledgement as her heart hammered in her chest. Although he made no denial and a smile graced his face, his harsh voice and plain indifference showed he wasn't beaming with joy. She remembers that her mother also failed to congratulate her or acknowledge her swollen belly. Snapped back to the present, Sylvia begs for forgiveness because she doesn't have much time left. Sylvia admits she is afraid of being alone, making Ilya wonder if it would be cruel to deny her this one thing, or if impending death demands unconditional forgiveness. Refusing to die all alone, Sylvia's pleading voice simply lilts past Ilya, utterly failing to move her one bit. Furious and demanding answers, Soleil interrogates Ilya about what the hell she said to Sylvia. However, Ilya internally laments that she couldn't bring herself to utter a single word of assurance or forgiveness. A heavy, suffocating silence stretches between the estranged couple. The vast physical and emotional distance completely isolates them from one another. Refusing to believe her weak protests of innocence, Soleil angrily accuses Ilya of lying, claiming a tearful Sylvia is proof enough of her cruelty. Declaring he has had enough of her innocent facade, Soleil viciously claims she has plotted against countless people and can no longer be trusted. Glaring down at her with piercing suspicion, He questions her absolute loyalty with a single, devastating thought. Delivering a profoundly crushing blow, Soleil coldly demands to know if the child she is currently carrying is even his. Plunging forward in time, a bedridden Ilya weakly refuses a sorrowful doctor's plea to abort her child to save her fading life. She realizes with agonizing clarity that words can effortlessly kill without a physical blade. Gasping in horror, Ilya finally understands that Soleil distanced himself because he expected a child that looked exactly like him to be born. She realizes he actually views her as a despicable monster. He truly believes she would use another man's child as a sick, desperate stepping stone to bind him. Amidst a chorus of loud wails and relieved cheers, the exhausted maids successfully deliver Ilya's baby safely into the world. Slipping rapidly into the cold embrace of death, Ilya glimpses the golden hair of a strange knight, perishing before she can even hold her newborn child. She dies utterly alone and consumed by sadness, knowing Soleil completely abandoned her during labor to comfort a frightened Sylvia instead. Drowning in an endless abyss of despair, she completely breaks down, screaming that she cannot endure this terrifying cycle of rebirth and loneliness anymore. The traumatic vision violently shatters, snapping Ilya back to reality as she stands frozen beside Soleil in the sunlit garden. Completely traumatized by the visceral memories of her previous life, Ilya stares blankly ahead in a state of suffocating shock. A deeply concerned Sylvia and an impatient Soleil call out to her, watching as Ilya wobbles dangerously on her feet. Staring down at the spilled tea dripping off the table, a disoriented Ilya struggles to comprehend her sudden shift in reality. Clutching her head in mounting panic, she frantically wonders where her child is gone, realizing she is trapped back at the cursed tea party where Soleil and Sylvia first met. The horrifying truth dawns on her that her agonizing labor and tragic death have been entirely erased by time. Soleil confusedly asks what she is mumbling about. Completely snapping under the psychological torture, Ilya screams at Soleil, furiously demanding to know what more he could possibly want from her. Tears streaming down her face, she viciously accuses a bewildered Soleil of abandoning her to give birth all by herself. Frantically demanding he return her baby, Ilya leaves a stunned Soleil utterly speechless and completely lost. Ignoring her sister's confusion, Ilya panics over the fact that she never even got the chance to see her baby's face before dying. When Sylvia gently approaches to check her health, Ilya violently recoils and wildly accuses her sister of snatching the infant away. Grabbing Sylvia in a fit of hysterical rage, Ilya screams at her to give the child back, accusing her of ruthlessly stealing her baby just like she stole Soleil. Tightening her furious grip on a gasping Sylvia, Ilya commands the terrified girl to return absolutely everything she stole from her. Before the violence can escalate, Soleil violently yanks Ilya away, roaring that she isn't even married yet, let alone a mother to any children. Shielding a trembling Sylvia with his own body, Soleil viciously glares at Ilya and declares that her sister has not stolen a single thing from her. Staring at the protective embrace, a shattered Ilya realizes he is completely wrong, entirely blind to the agonizing truth of her repeated suffering. Her heart pounding in sheer dread, Ilya reaches her absolute breaking point, knowing she can no longer endure the man she loves looking at her with such intense hatred and contempt. A heavy thud pulses in her ears as she realizes she is reliving her final moments, hopelessly begging for anyone to save her from this nightmare. Despite being so certain she had brought everything to a close, she is left dizzily questioning why she is standing in this exact same spot when she had desperately wished to be put out of her misery. Sensing her distress, Al swiftly scoops her up into his arms and calmly asks Soleil for a pardon to excuse her. Soleil merely looks on in mild confusion as Al explains that Milady seems to be out of sorts and politely asks if she may be excused. Carried away in his strong arms, her blurred vision fades as she deliriously begs for someone to give her precious child back. She cries out that she was completely alone when she went into labor, accusing Al of never coming for her despite his earnest promises to rush to the ends of the earth if she called. Fully aware that her words sound like mad drivel conflicting with reality, she notes how Al patiently responds to her instead of dismissing her, even as she insists he left her when no one else was there. In her erratic state, she blurts out that he must have gone mad, firmly telling him that he cannot stay by her side because if he does, he is bound to die again. Realizing she nearly said her darkest fears out loud, she stops herself, knowing his kind and loyal nature is exactly what got him caught up in the tragedies of her first life. Al gently interrupts her alarming words, warmly insisting that she will feel much better once she has rested in her room because she must be exhausted. She sighs and agrees to rest, but then quietly asks a grave question. What if there comes a day when she doesn't feel better? Cradled safely in his arms, she softly asks Al a terrible favor. If she ever says she cannot go on anymore, she wants him to crush her heart. She desperately wishes to feel nothing anymore, begging him to do this so that she will never get hurt by anyone ever again, to which he firmly replies that he cannot do that. Al clutches her tightly against his chest as they walk toward the mansion, quietly stating that he could never do such a horrible thing. Dazed and disoriented, she stares blankly ahead, feeling as though she is just wandering aimlessly in a long, terrible dream. A week passes, and she has successfully returned to playing the part of her old, composed self, politely apologizing to everyone for ruining the previous tea party. Yet, beneath her calm facade, the sudden, violent memory of being accused of killing Sylvia violently jolts her mind. She flinches internally, haunted by the traumatic memories of rattling the iron bars of her dungeon cell and begging to be let out. Sometimes, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, she is suddenly overcome by these terrifying flashbacks, releasing a panicked wail. She hears the phantom cries of a newborn wailing in the dark, desperately reaching out for the child she loves with all her heart. Seeking comfort in her fractured mind, she occasionally stands alone in her lavish room, cradling an invisible child tightly in her arms. She admits she isn't completely broken, but is painfully aware that she is mimicking motions for a child she yearns for but can no longer even remember. Suddenly, a large, dark crow flaps into her room and perches on her vanity, mockingly asking the captive princess if she knows who he is. The crow introduces himself as a bird of ill omen, staring at her with glowing eyes. A massive, shadowy manifestation of the crow looms over her, repeating his sinister introduction as a harbinger of doom. Unfazed, she calmly tells the creature that his presence is of little consequence, as the worst misfortune has already befallen her. The crow seems to grin, asking with a dark smirk if that invisible bundle she is holding is her child, making her wonder if this is all an illusion. When she asks how he knows, the crow boldly states that of course he knows, because he has been watching her this entire time. The crow taunts her, claiming he was watching the whole time she cradled the invisible child, mockingly betting that the baby is truly adorable. Chuckling darkly at her empty arms, the crow asks what brings her to this room, to which she coldly replies that she might have come here precisely because it is empty. Dismissing his confusing words, a massive black crow violently rustles its feathers and prepares to speak. Claiming he is simply bored stiff, the mysterious creature suddenly morphs into a sleek black cat. Staring blankly at the feline, Ilya coolly admits she finds it cute but doesn't particularly adore it. Instantly transforming back into a crow, he demands to know if she dislikes his current form since most girls are usually quite taken with it. Piercing her with an eerie, glowing gaze, the bird bluntly asks why she is locked up in a place like this. Flapping around the room, he teasingly calls her a lovely princess, though she bitterly rejects the grand title and denies having any beauty. Pushing the issue, the crow wonders why a noble princess resides in such a room, prompting Ilya to defensively state that it is her own bedroom. Realizing he is dead serious, she asks what he means as the bird lands on her bed and claims the place isn't as awful as she makes it out to be. Gliding gracefully toward the window, the crow commands the princess to look very closely. He points out the heavy, unforgiving iron bars securely fitted across the glass. Staring in stunned silence, Ilya begins to slowly process the creature's sharp observation. Turning to the bird she now calls Crow, she wonders out loud how he possibly managed to get inside without using the barred windows. Gaping in pure disbelief, Crow screams in shock that she is actually worried about his entry method instead of her prison-like bars. Chuckling at her sheer absurdity, he decides she really has gone mad and tells her to forget everything he just said. Completely unfazed, Ilya states her interest has been piqued and praises his fine form, to which the bird happily declares he is sold. Suddenly, his voice morphs into the deep, rich baritone of a grown man as he dangerously offers to lend her his assistance. Narrowing her eyes, she demands to know exactly what he is offering to help her with. Without a shred of hesitation, he promises he would gladly do anything for her, even if she asked him to kill someone. Scoffing at her perceived innocence, he boasts that murder is mere child's play for a being like him. Exploding into a massive cloud of thick smoke, he promises to lend a hand if she truly wishes for it. A dark, mysterious smirk visibly forms within the dissipating shadows. As the smoke clears, Ilya stares in utter shock as the bird completely transforms into a striking human man. Watching him stand tall in a dark cloak, she marvels at the impossible magic trick unfolding right before her eyes. Laughing at her surprising lack of fear, the man formally reintroduces himself as simply Crow and tells her to address him however she pleases. Gazing up at his striking features, Ilya is instantly captivated by his overwhelming beauty. Sliding dangerously close, he reaches out to touch her, sending a violent shiver down her spine as she registers his ice-cold hands. Leaning into her space, he casually questions what misfortunes trap her here, wondering if it involves the iron bars or something far deeper. Completely ignoring his sinister probing, Ilya bluntly points out that his eyes are a completely different color than when he was a bird. Bursting into absolute hysterics, Crow calls her a truly odd girl before flashing a wild grin and asking if he should help her. Feeling his freezing breath against her skin, Ilya locks eyes with the mysterious entity and demands to know why he would want to do that. Glaring down at her with sharp impatience, the shadowed figure questions why she is still asking such pointless things at this late juncture. He bitterly declares that he is sick and tired of this dreary life, driven to absolute boredom by the endless monotony. Offering her a twisted lifeline, he smirks and presents a special, free service, claiming he doesn't mind helping her out just for the sheer entertainment. Leaning in to seal the deal, he demands to know her answer as Ilya reflects on this fateful, life-altering encounter. Standing before the grand estate in her youth, a young Ilya greets him politely, internally wondering when her agonizing descent truly began. A young Soleil formally introduces himself, prompting Ilya to offer a flawless curtsy as she properly states her own name. Watching the elegant display, the surrounding noblewomen immediately praise her, fawning over what a lovely and exemplary young lady she is. A sudden, sharp realization seems to strike Soleil, his darkened eyes widening ever so slightly as he gazes at her. Knowing he is quietly grieving his recently deceased fiancée, Ilya recalls how everyone, including her own father, pushed her to emulate the perfect girl who died. Accepting his kind invitation for a stroll by the lake, Ilya struggles through the garden as her heavy dress continually snags and trips her. Startled by her sudden halt, Soleil turns back and quietly asks what the matter is. Instead of pointing out her clumsy struggles, Soleil politely pretends nothing is amiss to spare her pride. Silently gazing up at the sky, he patiently waits for her to untangle herself without uttering a single word of complaint or impatience. Though she desperately rushes to catch up, Ilya bitterly assumes his refusal to look back means he harbors absolutely no interest in her. Finally catching up to his side, she breathes a sigh of relief as their pinkies briefly and gently brush against each other. Catching the brief contact, Soleil flashes her a soft, fleeting smile that completely takes her breath away. Instead of coddling her by offering his hand, Ilya realizes he patiently waited out of deep respect for her status as a fellow noble. Having always been sidelined for her delicate sister Sylvia, Ilya finds herself profoundly moved by this quiet, respectful kindness. A sudden flock of white birds violently bursts from the bushes, scattering into the sky as the two children watch in awe. Breaking the serene silence, Soleil softly calls out her name. Flashing a warm smile, he expresses his genuine hope that they can get along well from here on out. Though he was merely a grieving 7-year-old boy, Ilya realizes he was already bravely looking ahead to their shared future. The memory violently twists as she wonders why everything fell apart when they had seemingly promised to build a harmonious life together. The nostalgic illusion shatters instantly as the sound of a breaking teacup snaps Ilya back to the terrifying reality of the present. Brushing off the shattered porcelain as a mere slip of the hand, Ilya trembles as the fractured memories of her countless past loops finally flood her mind. Ordering the maids to clean the mess, she mentally grasps that her fragmented memories only clearly extend back to the single previous loop. Knowing this fateful tea party is exactly where the nightmare begins, Ilya sharply excuses herself to escape the unfolding tragedy. Claiming she feels under the weather, she catches a subtle, almost imperceptible shift of displeasure in Soleil's stoic expression. Before he can offer Sylvia a seat, Ilya swiftly bows out, formally leaving her sister in Soleil's care to sever her own involvement. Without looking back, Ilya accepts her servant's guiding hand and strides away from the table, desperate to rewrite her doomed fate. Shocked by his sudden boldness, she stares at Al, wondering why he would openly offer to escort her right in front of her fiancé. Seeing Soleil smile instead of rebuking him given the circumstances, she accepts the bitter truth with a quiet nod. Her heart throbs painfully as she realizes Soleil is no longer paying any heed to her, filling her with a sickening sense of dread. Gazing dazedly ahead as Elle calls out to her, she wonders why she never tires of getting hurt time and time again. Her heart gives a sudden jolt, forcing her to realize she mustn't make Elle worry like this as he quietly begs for her attention. Stepping closer with his hand placed earnestly over his heart, he gently asks her to tell him what she wishes for. He reaches his hand out to her, pleading with her to take it. A vivid memory surfaces of a past life where she actually took the hand he offered and recklessly eloped with him. Desperate to get away from them because Soleil was already losing his heart to Sylvia, her escape was abruptly cut short by a violent slash. In a dark alleyway surrounded by cloaked assassins, Elle staggers forward and collapses to the bloody ground with a heavy thump. She screams his name in pure agony, weeping over the loyal knight who dutifully defended her with his life before being ruthlessly cut down. Her imposing pursuers coldly inform her that it would be extremely inconvenient if she shirked her duties, revealing that their escape plan had been leaked. Realizing she was far more valuable as a count's daughter than she ever pegged herself to be, she is stunned that they dispatched a private intelligence unit just to hunt her down. She remembers another life where Elle firmly declared she was his one and only mistress, vowing to take orders from no one but her. He had told her his heart would remain with her even when apart, a devoted reason for living that tragically caused her to misunderstand his true feelings. Slowly coming to believe she was his entire world, she had proudly claimed the title of Alfred's fiancée. Her illusion was shattered when a tearful woman confronted her, revealing that she was his actual fiancée and asking if Ilya was even aware of her existence. Clenching her dress in shame, Ilya admits she had absolutely no idea because Elle never mentioned her and she never bothered to ask. The heartbroken woman cries that they were waiting to settle down once things calmed for Ilya, exposing Ilya's foolish assumption that no words were necessary between her and her knight. Sobbing over her dead lover, the woman laments that Alfred pledged his loyalty and wound up dead, leaving Ilya to silently beg for the Lord's forgiveness. Calling herself a blind fool, she realizes she took his kindness for granted and stole him away, wrongly grasping his outstretched hand when those gentle hands were never meant to protect her. High society did not take kindly to an aristocratic lady trying to elope, but the absolute worst part was Soleil's barely concealed disappointment. Staring at her with icy eyes, Soleil coldly asks why she is the one with a pained expression after she was the one who abandoned him. With the rest of that life remaining a blur where Soleil and Sylvia never married, she swears to press forward entirely on her own in this next iteration. Steeling her resolve with a sharp snap of her fan, she commands herself to understand that no one can replace her. In the present, Sylvia excitedly bursts into the room, cheerfully asking her big sister to pick up their language studies from where they left off yesterday. Ilya's face brightens as she asks if Sylvia is already done, noting she only planned to continue after her sister had fully internalized the previous lesson. Outside the doors, the maids whisper about how much Lady Ilya has changed lately, while inside, Sylvia praises her sister as a wonderful teacher who makes learning thrilling. Closing the book with a warm smile, Ilya tells Sylvia she is glad to see her so eager to learn, completely shocking the eavesdropping maids with her new persona. Sylvia suddenly grips her dress and looks down hesitantly, nervously trying to confess something about how she felt up till now. Exhausted by her delicate constitution, Sylvia admits that merely chatting wears her down and strolling is her absolute limit. Realizing why Sylvia was constantly coddled and told to just live, Ilya bitterly recalls feeling like she herself was already dead. Trapped in her own despair, she felt like she was slowly withering away in the shadows. Sylvia brightly thanks her big sister for making her life so immensely enjoyable, but Ilya gently squeezes her hand and asks her not to. Knowing from her past lives that the frail Sylvia can actually get pregnant, Ilya secretly acknowledges she is simply training her sister to take her place. She confidently reasons that Soleil will protect his beloved no matter what, leaving Sylvia with absolutely no trouble taking on the mantle of the Marquis's consort. True to her word, Sylvia eagerly expands her cultural knowledge and happily promises to do her very best to make Ilya proud. The kinder Ilya acts, the livelier Sylvia becomes, improving so drastically that the doctor suspects her past illness was partly due to depression. A strict tutor praises Ilya for doing an excellent job, marking the very first time such great faith has been placed in her. The more fiercely Ilya cherishes her sister, the more favorably the surrounding nobles look upon her, and Soleil proves to be no exception. Watching Soleil smile brighter than he ever has in any of her previous lives, Ilya painfully accepts just how much he cherishes Sylvia. He warmly assures Sylvia not to fret, promising that a picture-perfect fairy tale ending filled with pure bliss awaits them both. Meanwhile, Ilya furiously scratches away at her endless paperwork in the dark, wondering what will become of her since she still has so much to learn. Overwhelmed by her isolating burden, she breaks down sobbing at her desk while her quill continuously scrapes against the parchment. Despite studying until her hands literally bleed, she feels like a massive failure who can never find the same joyful spark in learning that Sylvia does. Crushed by the immense pressure of her relentless studies, she desperately yearns to just run away from it all. Ripped away from her glamorous life, a chained and ragged Ilya wonders why things turned out this horrific way since she deliberately didn't turn to Al for an escape. She realizes seeking help from a trusted merchant must have been her fatal mistake, directly leading to her being put up for sale. Stripped of all her possessions and covered in filthy grime, she knows absolutely no one will believe she is an aristocrat despite trafficking nobles being a serious crime. A dark, rattling wagon mercilessly transports the captive girls through the desolate woods. Clenching her ruined clothes, Ilya mutters in the darkness, desperately demanding to know why this horrific fate is happening to her alone. A weary voice suddenly cuts through her isolating despair, reminding her that she is not the only one suffering. The chained girl beside her lets out a soft, defeated humph. Glancing at her fellow captive, Ilya silently agrees that the girl is absolutely right. She accepts they are all in the exact same miserable boat, tricked, dehumanized, and sold off like mere chattel. The iron bars clack shut with a deafening finality, sealing their terrifying reality. However, as she stares into the void, Ilya knows she is the only one truly trapped in this never-ending hell of looping time. A harsh voice barks at her to get up, and she grimly accepts that as long as Sylvia exists, no one will ever come looking for her. A slaver violently yanks her forward by her chains, loudly announcing that she has a customer waiting. A disgusting man laughs sadistically in the shadows as Ilya stares blankly ahead with completely dead, defeated eyes. A menacing voice taunts Ilya in the darkness, violently grabbing her and demanding she pay with her body since she ended up in such a wretched place. Ilya bitterly reflects that she had once been proud of surviving various hells, having now fallen to the absolute lowest depths of a filthy brothel. She realizes how utterly stupid she was for constantly telling herself she just had to desperately endure whatever horrors came her way. Questioning her own foolish hopes and dreams, she finally admits that a meaningless life trapped in the worst kind of hell isn't worth living at all. The dark memories suddenly shift as a warm, comforting voice gently offers her medicine. A young boy with jet black hair approaches her bedside, softly reassuring her that she is safe now as he hands her a cup. Weak and battered, Ilya slowly accepts the cup from the mysterious boy while staring at him with a weary, clouded gaze. The strange boy patiently urges her to drink, having suddenly appeared out of nowhere to stay by her side and nurse her back to health. Staring into his dark eyes, Ilya is violently struck by flashbacks of a man known as Crow, possessing the exact same pale skin and pitch-black eyes. Despite the striking and uncanny resemblance, she notes that this boy's physique is entirely different and he is far younger than the terrifying Crow from her past lives. Convinced he is simply the current life's version of Crow, Ilya silently bids him farewell while he gently coaxes her to take a small sip of the medicine. The moment the liquid touches her lips, Ilya violently chokes and gasps, coughing roughly as the worried boy watches. The boy frantically calls out her name, begging to know if she needs anything while Ilya despairs over her rapidly fading life. She remembers abandoning her noble title during a kidnapping, forcefully adopting the name Sylvia, while admitting she could never truly let go of her real identity as Ilya. Snapping back from her grim reflection, Ilya gazes at the deeply concerned boy asking how he can possibly ease her pain. Staring into his earnest eyes, she realizes this gentle child is fundamentally different from the ruthless Crow she once knew, silently thanking him for his genuine help. Conceding that crows are terrible omens in a world cursed with misfortune, she bitterly accepts she has nothing left to ask from this small, bird-like boy. The dreary atmosphere suddenly lifts as Ilya's eyes flutter open, drawn by the sound of a beautiful, mysterious song. Waking up with a soft gasp, Ilya finds herself resting peacefully outside on Lord Soleil's lap. Soleil gazes down at her with a remarkably tender expression, softly noting that she has finally opened her eyes. Flustered and deeply embarrassed for falling asleep in front of him, Ilya frantically apologizes, but Soleil gently reassures her that it is perfectly fine since she has been overworked. He soothingly brushes a stray hair from her face, reminding her that they are completely alone in the quiet garden. Relaxing into his comforting presence, Ilya closes her eyes and listens to the gentle melody drifting through the air. When Soleil asks what she is humming, she reveals it is a beautiful lullaby she surprisingly misses, despite it being her first time hearing the actual melody. A surprised Soleil asks if her mother used to sing it to her, prompting Ilya to admit she isn't entirely sure since she never expected him to know such a sweet tune. Soleil gently pats her as she wonders aloud if he had someone special who sang the universal lullaby to him. The scene shifts to the two looking at a beautifully colored picture book, with Ilya marveling at the rich paints easily supplied by the wealthy Marquis estate. Pointing excitedly at the vivid pages, Soleil promises that they will visit the beautiful places in the book together once they are married. Blushing deeply as he earnestly vows to explore the world by her side, Ilya lets out a sudden gasp of surprise. Startled by her own joyful reaction, Ilya beams brightly and happily agrees to his heartwarming proposal. Gazing down at her weary form, Soleil asks if she has fallen asleep once again. Trapped in pitch-black darkness, she hauntingly recalls a broken promise and a fading dream that left her completely abandoned. Jolting awake in sheer confusion, she gasps out loud as she frantically tries to comprehend her surroundings. Glaring with a wide, terrified eye, she spots the mysterious crow standing silently in the shadows of her room. Panicking wildly, she demands to know who he is just as a terrified maid bursts through the door. The horrified maid drops to her knees, crying out in shock at the devastating state her beloved lady is in. Without a word, a familiar figure steps forward and gently scoops her fragile body up into his protective arms. Finding it incredibly strange that anyone would want a dying person, she listens to his nostalgic voice suggesting they finally go home. Looking up in utter disbelief, she spots his golden hair and instantly recognizes her loyal night owl. Burying his face against her, Al furiously apologizes for taking so long to bring her back. Heartbroken and adrift, she cries that she has no home left to return to and wonders why he still sheds tears for her. Crow watches the heartbreaking reunion from the shadows, scoffing mockingly as Al carries her away. Striding purposefully, Al assures her that he has secured her old life and will seamlessly restore everything she once owned. Frantically begging to be put down, she demands Al stop so she can finally speak to Crow. Refusing to return, she realizes with a massive shock that she never actually told Al where she was hiding. Resigned to her dark fate, she admits she would be fine anywhere as long as Crow remains by her side. She bitterly reveals her desperate past hope that Al would stay with her until she took her very last breath. Calling out weakly for Crow, she stares blankly into the opulent ceiling above. Reaching out a trembling hand into the void, she desperately searches for the one person who didn't look at her with disgust. Waking up surrounded by fresh air and luxurious sheets, she is stunned to hear her sister's sweet voice. Her vision still completely blurry, she senses Sylvia leaning over her with a deeply worried expression. Apologizing for making her worry, she asks her sister to simply let her sleep forever as death rapidly approaches. Sylvia's gentle voice presses on, anxiously asking if she is in pain or finding it hard to endure. Feeling completely trapped by the girl's soothing tone, she wonders why this child has the agonizing power to rip her apart. Giving up on ever finding someone who understands her, she silently laments her painfully bitter fate. Remembering her miserable time stuck in the brothel, she recalls how Crow was the only one who showed no pity or disgust. Sylvia gently interrupts her fading thoughts to announce that Soleil wants to speak with her for a moment. Soleil steps into view with a chillingly cold stare, sternly calling out her name. Glaring down at her fragile form, he ruthlessly declares that he has always despised her. Berating her for betraying him and running away, he furiously condemns her for ignoring her responsibilities after their engagement. Confronting the harsh reality, Ilya expresses her deep pain over Sylvia admitting she already has a man she loves. She vividly recalls confiding to her sister that she would willingly do anything for the person she liked. Hurt by the lack of trust, she questions why her partner hid his struggles despite their formal engagement. He coldly clarifies that he fled because he assumed they would get along well as a practical couple, even knowing her feelings were never true love. He sharply reveals that her affection for Sylvia originally gave him hope for their friendship, but she completely destroyed those chances. Condemning her past actions, he admits he deliberately left her alone downtown, knowing a spoiled aristocrat would suffer immensely as a fitting punishment. Acknowledging her own faults, Ilya realizes that despite his past betrayals across looping timelines, she is the one who betrayed his current self. Bowing his head, he solemnly expresses his deep gratitude. He joyfully credits her for allowing him and Sylvia to start a beautiful family blessed with 2 children, causing Ilya's mind to desperately call out for Crow. Haunted by the tragic memory, she cries out into the void, demanding to know where Crow is and why he isn't with her now. Screams for a doctor violently shatter the air as a dying Ilya admits she simply wished for death while staring into his tender gaze. She reflects with bitter irony that the room she believed held everything she ever wanted was actually completely empty. Bleeding out in her final moments, her only lingering regret is never getting to touch Crow's soft black hair. Snapping back to a bustling garden party, aristocratic guests gasp in pure awe as the radiant Lady Sylvia makes her grand entrance. Cruel whispers echo through the crowd, openly declaring that the beautiful Sylvia is far more suited for Lord Soleil than Ilya ever could be. Gazing at the smiling couple, Ilya numbly agrees that the two look absolutely breathtaking, as if plucked straight from a romantic painting. A concerned Sylvia abruptly breaks her trance, gently pointing out that her older sister does not look well at all. Surrounding noblewomen viciously gossip about Sylvia's lack of etiquette due to her frailty, deeply annoying an exhausted Ilya who is sick of the relentless chatter. Staring anxiously into her eyes, Sylvia nervously asks if her big sister was just about to cry. Completely ignoring the question, Ilya mentally focuses on Lord Soleil, silently wondering if Sylvia truly loves him and accepts their current dynamic. She plainly admits to herself that she used to be deeply enamored, having fallen for Lord Soleil the very second they first met. However, watching the golden couple now, she realizes something deep within her heart has fundamentally shifted. Staring blankly at her teacup, she acknowledges that her once-consuming feelings have undeniably changed. Waking up alone in her bed, Ilya immediately forces herself to remember that her true, original self no longer exists in this timeline. Her heart drops in absolute dread when a loyal maid suddenly presents a freshly delivered letter from the Marquis. The servant quickly announces that Lord Soleil wishes to visit immediately, sending the staff into a frantic rush to prepare a suitable meal. Trapped by the sudden notice, Ilya realizes she has absolutely no time to decline and resolves to wait in the library while her informal dress is readied. Reading the letter's final lines, she notes with dull resignation that the Marquis eagerly requested the frail Sylvia to join their lunch as well. Seeking a momentary escape in the towering library, Ilya desperately stretches to reach a book on a painfully high shelf. A panicked Al suddenly intervenes to prevent her from falling, asking what she needs, but a lost Ilya blankly admits she doesn't even know what she is looking for. Lost in a maze of repeating tragedies, Ilya desperately searches the vast library, driven by an agonizing hunt for a truth she cannot even define. Trapped in an endless loop of familiar faces and predictable heartbreak, she realizes her soul-burning desire is to uncover the mysteries of the enigmatic Crow. Recalling a past life where she vainly scoured the town for him, she marvels at his inhuman nature, knowing he can seamlessly transform into a bird, a cat, or a man. Scouring through countless ancient texts and historical records, she stubbornly hunts for a single shred of evidence proving his extraordinary existence. Her older brother Al interrupts her frantic research, utterly bewildered as to why she is obsessively hunting for something completely unknown. Refusing to drag her brother into her impossible quest, a determined Ilya simply declares that she desperately wants to meet him. She silently vows to shoulder the heavy burden alone, driven by a pure, unshakable wish to see him just one more time. Standing before a massive stack of dusty tomes, a concerned Al watches as Ilya fiercely confirms she intends to read every single one. Knowing her obsession appears complete madness, she justifies the grueling search by revealing that Crow's history violently splinters and shifts with every timeline reset. Stepping out of the library with Al, Ilya freezes in shock as she spots a young Lord Soleil standing beside a beaming Sylvia. Flashing a radiant smile, Sylvia cheerfully explains that they waited together in the guest room since Lord Soleil arrived surprisingly early. Suddenly hyper-aware of her own dusty, servant-like appearance, an insecure Ilya listens silently as Soleil smoothly proposes they all enjoy some newly purchased tea. Desperate to escape the humiliating comparison, Ilya awkwardly excuses herself to change clothes, instructing Sylvia to serve their guests in her absence. When an innocent Sylvia pouts and asks why she cannot serve tea in her own room, a flustered Ilya strictly warns her that a noble lady alone with a man invites scandalous rumors. Soleil casually dismisses the rigid etiquette, confidently assuring a tense Ilya that the mansion's loyal employees make such extreme caution entirely unnecessary. Ilya silently glares at him, Infuriated that a high-ranking noble fully understands the dangerous rules yet blatantly chooses to bend them for Sylvia. Realizing he is manipulating the situation to force her hand while clearly favoring her sister, Ilya bristles at the sheer unfairness of his silent demand. Crushed by his unspoken bias, Ilya bitterly concedes that her protective warning was unnecessary, bowing her head in quiet defeat. Without waiting for a response, Ilya sharply turns on her heel to leave, entirely ignoring Soleil until he suddenly commands her to wait. Startled by his uncharacteristic outburst, Ilya pauses and turns back to face a surprisingly conflicted Lord Soleil. He softly calls out her name, leaving both Ilya and Al completely bewildered by the sudden, intense shift in his demeanor. When he hesitantly asks if she has something she wants to say to him, Ilya coldly denies it, internally panicking over his bizarre inquiry. Staring at her with a troubled gaze, Soleil murmurs that she has somehow changed, sending a violent shockwave through Ilya's core. Desperate to escape his piercing observation, Ilya violently shakes off her shock and urgently ushers her brother down the hall. Fleeing the heavy tension, she frantically convinces herself that Soleil couldn't possibly have noticed her inner transformation, dismissing it as a mere trick of the light. Plunging into a dark memory of her past, she remembers the agonizing pain of having her true feelings completely ignored until the bitter end. Haunted by the suffocating need to avoid comparison, she recalls deliberately styling her hair and dresses to be the exact opposite of the radiant Sylvia. Even when she finally gathered the courage to wear a light dress, the entire court completely ignored her while showering Sylvia with endless, fawning compliments. Piercing through the darkness of her despair, a mysterious voice suddenly echoes in her memory, gently asking if she truly loves the color white. Snapping back to reality, Ilya orders her maid to tie her hair in a plain chignon, cherishing the warm realization that Crow was the only person across all her lives to ever truly see her. Sitting quietly in her room, she is caught off guard when Crow suddenly compares her hair to a branch's shadow resting on the snow. He smoothly explains that a true snow's cape includes the thicket's dark shadow, making it far more beautiful than a plain white prairie. Staring at her intensely, he declares that no matter her hair color or the shape of her face, she is an irreplaceable part of that snow. Leaning in close, the mysterious boy gently vows that he shall always think she is absolutely gorgeous. Astonished by his sudden praise, she silently wonders how he could possibly know that she constantly drags her own self-worth through the mud by comparing herself to Sylvia. She recalls Lord Simon trying to comfort her by saying she shouldn't worry about Soleil's words, giving her the hollow reassurance she wanted to hear. Now, whenever she excuses herself from the suffocating tea parties, she desperately opens her door hoping to find Crow waiting for her. Reflecting on the day they first met, she remembers the massive, imposing bird demanding to know the captured princess's name. Even though he repeatedly refused to reveal his origins, he became her sole beacon of hope by giving her the exact words she needed to survive. Back in the oppressive present, Soleil remarks that her hair is like dull iron, and her mouth moves completely against her will to agree with his resigned smile. He coldly points out that her parents dislike her faded green eyes because they resemble withering leaves, forcing her to agree despite her inner protests. As a gentle breeze sweeps past, she solemnly accepts that confirmation is only natural since he clearly expected her to submit. Despite knowing this submissive shell isn't her true self, she still feels a strange comfort whenever she sees her reflection in his light-filled eyes. Suddenly, Soleil notices Sylvia approaching with her maids and swiftly uses his upcoming etiquette lessons as an excuse to end the conversation. Left behind, Ilya watches him turn away and bitterly wonders why he is leaving so soon when this tea party was supposed to be just for them. Sylvia rushes over with a bright blush and a radiant smile, happily greeting her big brother Soleil. Watching the sickeningly sweet exchange, Ilya feels a complete detachment from reality as hollow words continue to pour from her lips. Sylvia gazes up at him with teary, flushed cheeks, making it painfully obvious that her feelings go far beyond sisterly affection. Staring at her sister's deeply affectionate gaze, Ilya realizes those are the exact loving eyes she desperately wishes to see her own reflection in. In a distant memory, a sparring knight playfully warns Soleil that a popular rumor claims his fiancée is ruthlessly keeping all other women away. The friend warns him to stay away from a woman's crazy jealousy, completely convinced that Ilya is sparing no effort to fiercely hold onto her beliefs. Although the friend calls her supposed behavior heinous, Soleil internally seethes with pure rage because he actually witnessed the scene himself. Instead of correcting the rumor, A malicious smile creeps onto Soleil's face as he firmly decides to deny the claim because he believes Sylvia would never do such a thing. Blindly devoted, he vows to always be there to believe Sylvia even if the entire world doubts her, cementing his twisted loyalty. Back in the sunlit garden, Sylvia gratefully tells Soleil that her overprotective parents would have never allowed her outside if it weren't for him. Soleil smiles warmly and agrees, lamenting that her family unfortunately treats her as if she will get sick from a simple breeze. Urging her to go out more often, he beautifully describes how feeling the earth and exchanging words with others will surely help her want to live. Overcome with emotion, Sylvia stares deeply into his eyes and tearfully begs him to be her single hope to live. Thrilled by her desperate plea, Soleil internally rejoices, fully convinced that being Sylvia's will to live as her brother-in-law is the ultimate pleasure. Unaware of the true depth of her suffering, Soleil coldly thanks Ilya for preparing a dress and being kind to Sylvia, completely oblivious to the dark thoughts swirling in his fiancée's mind. Soleil coldly states he has no complaints, prompting the dark-haired Ilya to remark that he doesn't look pleased. When Ilya wholeheartedly apologizes for causing any irritation, a confused Soleil wonders what his own words were just a moment ago. After reassuring Ilya that she has done nothing wrong, a sudden visual distortion hits Soleil as his reality begins to splinter. A shadowed, corrupted reflection furiously demands to know who the hell he is. Back at the night station, a fellow knight teasingly reads over Soleil's shoulder, mocking his rigid letter to his new wife as a mere report. As the knight casually notes that Sylvia would be viewed more favorably if she talked less, Soleil stares in shock at his pen writing completely unintended words. Realizing he should have placed more trust in Ilya's dedication to her duties, he resolves to finish the letters and enclose pressed flowers to thrill her. Without warning, a terrifying accusation shatters his thoughts, demanding to know if he was the one who killed Sylvia. A voice dripping with hatred vows never to forgive him, condemning the slaughter of her own blood as the world seemingly burns before him. Questioning his own past actions, Soleil orders his subordinate to halt the gathering of evidence meant to prove Ilya guilty, suddenly insisting she is incapable of such vicious acts. The unseen presence screams at him to stop, accusing him of murdering the maiden whose sole hope he used to be. In the library, an exasperated friend confronts Soleil, expressing absolute disbelief that he is locking up his own wife without an ounce of mercy. Soleil erupts into a furious rage, screaming that she killed Sylvia and utterly rejecting the idea that a husband should protect a murderer. Grabbing him by the lapels, the friend fiercely demands to know if Soleil ever visited her even once, declaring his neglect is reason enough to deny him forgiveness. As the friend accuses him of being the true murderer, he tragically reveals that Ilya still completely trusts Soleil's promise to come pick her up. The scene shifts to a beautifully lit room where the fragile, silver-haired Sylvia warmly embraces Lord Soleil. Though she sweetly claims she cannot live without him, Soleil internally recalls visiting a rumored prostitute matching her description only to find they looked absolutely nothing alike. The delicate illusion shatters as a sinister smile spreads across her face, asking if he can be her hope to live. Soleil bleakly admits that it was once enough for him to simply dream of her, but something darker now encroaches on his mind. A harsh memory intrudes, mocking Lord Soleil for casually strolling into a brothel in broad daylight. Noticing a fellow knight's entirely changed demeanor and gaze, Soleil demands to know why he faked his death, only for the man to reveal a friend helped him survive. The furious knight demands if Soleil has any idea how much his lady sacrificed for him, losing sleep to study and continuously throwing up at night while her sickly sister had it easy. He lists her agonizing burdens, from dark circles and ragged management books to needing painkillers and losing her voice from relentless vomiting. Striking Soleil in blind anger, the knight furiously demands to know if the oblivious lord ever noticed a single ounce of her suffering. A haunting vision of a lifeless hand resting on cracked stone flashes by, accompanied by the agonizing lament that she should not have died alone in that gruesome place. Tears streaming down his face, the knight screams that Soleil could have saved her, as he was the only one she ever needed. Overwhelmed by overlapping memories of Ilya degrading her own dark hair, Soleil's mind breaks as he realizes he killed her and horrifyingly questions why he is smiling. Consumed by absolute despair, he screams out into the void, begging anyone to tell him this horrific reality is just a lie. Soleil violently gasps for air as he jolts awake in bed, his sudden panic startling the nearby servant pouring water. Clutching his pounding chest in a cold sweat, Soleil listens as his servant gently asks if he suffered a terrible nightmare. Dismissing the missing memory as something trivial, Soleil brushes it off while Ilya internally struggles to recall a hazy nightmare. Musing over her formal speech patterns, Ilya tries to unravel the chaotic remnants of her bizarre dream before Soleil abruptly calls her name. Catching her completely off guard, Soleil expresses genuine curiosity about her well-being while an inexplicable sense of loss over an unknown girl washes over her. Plunging into painful memories, Ilya bitterly recalls how her mother cherished the adopted Sylvia far more than her own flesh and blood. Swallowing her agonizing jealousy, Ilya realizes she never once begged for the obligatory affection her mother showered freely upon her sister. Retreating deep within herself, a young Ilya silently constructs an impenetrable emotional wall to block out the agonizing rejection from her own mother. Staring blankly at the stone walls, she reflects on the very first time she was imprisoned and realizes her parents entirely turned their backs on her. A hollow realization dawns on Ilya that her family's estrangement wasn't a sudden betrayal for Sylvia, but a slow, agonizing drift over countless years. Seeking solace in the quiet courtyard, a solitary Ilya settles onto a sunlit bench and carefully unpacks a small woven basket of food. The peaceful silence shatters as heavy footsteps crunch against the gravel and a mysterious stranger suddenly approaches her. Looming over her with a disarming smile, a handsome, light-haired young man questions her choice to eat entirely alone. Recognizing his senior Knights Division uniform, a startled Ilya stares in mute shock as he smoothly asks to share her bench. Immediately shutting down his charming advance, Ilya rigidly cites noble etiquette and refuses to sit alone with a man who isn't her fiancé. Flashing a knowing smile, the stranger watches her carefully as Ilya recognizes him as the high-ranking foreign noble she once saw speaking intimately with Soleil. Feigning a polite retreat, the foreign noble apologizes for disturbing her peace and pretends to head back to his classes. Suddenly leaning back in, he smoothly points out her untouched food and insists she has plenty of time to linger in the garden. Dropping his casual facade, he confidently states her full noble name and boldly demands a little more of her precious time. Chuckling darkly that they share the exact same emotionless mask, he triggers a sharp instinct in Ilya that this seemingly good-natured boy is a dangerous predator. Striking a brutal nerve, he casually asks if she is hiding outside because Soleil is busy fawning over her little sister in the cafeteria. Refusing to let his provocative taunt break her iron composure, Ilya looks him dead in the eye and calmly agrees with his vicious assessment. Effortlessly spinning a flawless excuse, she claims Soleil's immense kindness simply afforded her a rare, peaceful moment alone to catch her breath. Fabricating a perfect sibling bond, she insists she happily entrusted her anxious sister to Soleil since the girl practically views him as a beloved older brother. Sensing the heavy skepticism behind Sion's knowing hum, Ilya realizes he shares the exact same scandalous suspicions as everyone else regarding Soleil and Sylvia. Masking her agonizing uncertainty, Ilya bitterly accepts that flawlessly delivering these pathetic excuses has become second nature to her. Studying her with intense fascination, Sion praises her surprising maturity while Ilya internally admits a past version of herself would have screamed in absolute fury. Slamming his boot onto the bench to block her escape, the foreign noble demands a proper introduction before detailing his true business with her. Formally introducing himself as Sion Topias from a neighboring country, he drops his playful facade and locks eyes with her. A chill runs down Ilya's spine as she suddenly realizes he deliberately hid his true surname, desperately trying to place the familiar name Sion. Connecting the terrifying dots, Ilya realizes this is the exact same boy who was intimately conversing with her fiancé and sister. Smirking at her dawning horror, Sion purrs that her shocked expression is exactly what he wanted to see as he prepares to reveal his true identity. As the blonde knight notes that political marriages are becoming a frowned-upon practice, Ilya bitterly assumes his words are a cruel ruse to wind her up. He acknowledges that such unions still offer massive benefits, prompting many nobles to dutifully embrace them as a rigid obligation. Tilting his head with a gentle smile, he observes that their country is still surprisingly understanding of marriages born from true love. Staring intently at Ilya, the young man boldly asks if she actually happens to be in love with Soleil. Cornered by his observation that her attitude toward her fiancé completely changed, she coldly states that she has no obligation to answer his invasive question. Reflecting on her past desperation to keep rivals away, she realizes her frantic feelings must have been glaringly obvious before she intentionally started avoiding Soleil. Leaning in incredibly close, the knight whispers a quiet confirmation into her ear. A painful memory suddenly surfaces of the day Ilya and her little sister Sylvia received special gifts from their father. While Sylvia was gifted a deeply personal portrait drawn by their father himself, Ilya was handed a cold, expensive jewel. Oblivious to the underlying rejection, a wide-eyed Sylvia innocently praises her older sister's beautiful new gift. Sylvia gushes over the truly beautiful necklace, while Ilya silently harbors deep envy over the handmade portrait. Misunderstanding Sylvia's hesitation, their father asks if she dislikes the painting he drew just for her, prompting a quick apology from the golden-haired girl. As Sylvia notes the jewel perfectly matches her sister's eyes, Ilya remembers how their father callously ordered a servant to simply fetch something of that exact color. Ilya grimly recalls being unexpectedly summoned to his study, where he uttered those careless instructions without even looking at her. Crushed by the realization that he bought the expensive jewelry purely out of obligation, she silently mourns the fatherly affection she truly yearned for. Snapping back to another memory, she recalls a time Crow leaned over her desk and bluntly asked if she ever wondered why she was unloved. Crow smoothly proposes that just as people do not need a specific reason to love, they also do not need a reason to deny their love to someone. Strolling casually through her quiet library, the dark-feathered entity notes that humans constantly and desperately seek reasons for their emotions. He finds it incredibly amusing how people create elaborate justifications just to feel relieved about their own natural, fleeting feelings. Staring at her with eyes full of suspicion, he questions the very fabric of her world by asking if a definitive reason for being loved truly matters. Driving the cruel point home, he asks if the complete absence of a reason to love renders everything she has furiously fought for utterly meaningless. Shocked by his deeply humanoid expression, she asks what kind of creature he truly is, earning a dark, amused chuckle in response. Jolting back to the present with a heavy thump at her desk, she tightly grips her quill and admits she already knows all her desperate efforts are in vain. A heavy wave of resignation crashes over her as she accepts the bitter truth she should have realized a long time ago. Glancing around the empty library, she suddenly wonders why this specific, unsettling conversation with Crow just violently surfaced in her mind. Trembling slightly, she realizes with mounting dread that those vivid memories simply were not there until this exact moment. Plagued by muddled memories from countless piled-up lives, she realizes her once perfect recollection has steadily deteriorated into a confusing blur. A terrifying thought strikes her that she might have forgotten something absolutely crucial, just as a maid lightly asks if she enjoys reading romance novels. Smiling softly, Ilya admits she only knows the synopsis of the cliché story about a knight's forbidden love affair with a neighboring princess. Dismissing the maid's gentle apology for criticizing the book, Ilya stares blankly ahead and admits the predictable love story somehow feels like an unrealistic fever dream. Staring intently, the bright-haired Sylvia confidently declares that she has always considered Lady Ilya to be a pragmatist. The conversation shifts as Sylvia cheerfully points out that the protagonist of a novel always gets a happy ending. Sylvia naively assumes that a princess eloping with a common knight guarantees a joyous future simply because they are in love. Piercing the fantasy further, Sylvia realizes that both the knight and the runaway princess likely abandoned their respective fiancés to selfishly elope. Bound by the invisible chains of nobility, Ilya reflects that both she and the fictional princess are trapped in inescapable political marriages where divorce is impossible. Unlike her own miserable reality, the protagonist is actually loved by her betrothed as they conquer every impossible obstacle in their path. She silently criticizes the fairy tale for completely ignoring the collateral damage, erasing the abandoned fiancés as if unfortunate people simply do not exist. Concluding that the entire narrative is conveniently manipulated to serve the protagonist, Ilya abruptly stands up and declares she must leave. Gazing down at the radiant Sylvia, Ilya is genuinely struck by her flawless, angelic beauty that perfectly befits her noble title. Just as she prepares to depart, a gentle voice calls out to stop her in her tracks. Clasping her hands together in mock empathy, the girl acknowledges that becoming the fiancée of a marquis' son must be an agonizingly heavy burden. With a chillingly serene expression, she confesses she has absolutely no idea how much desperate effort Ilya has exerted to survive thus far. Boldly stepping forward, the radiant girl declares she absolutely cannot tolerate a situation where Ilya's entire existence is being cruelly ignored. Startled by the sudden offer of pity, Ilya reflects that she might have foolishly accepted this charity during her first or second tragic lifetime. Firmly rejecting the pity, She politely insists there is no need for help because she has long abandoned the desperate struggle to win Soleil's heart. A fleeting memory of their innocent childhood resurfaces, bringing a painful sting to her fragile chest. Even without speaking a single word, his gentle eyes used to promise her that no matter what horrors happened, everything was bound to be all right. Clinging to those hollow memories, she desperately kept telling herself that things were fine just to preserve the way she used to feel. Like a withered, thorny rose turning to ash in the dark, his past promises have completely shattered and lost all meaning. Snapped violently back to the present, Elia stares blankly as a panicked maid rushes into the room demanding to know what happened. As the maid frantically taps around to clean the dark mess, Elia quietly asks for a moment alone to process the sudden chaos. Watching the black liquid drip like blood, she coldly calculates the devastating political fallout if a loose-lipped servant saw her pathetic state. Sitting like a broken doll amidst the encroaching shadows, Elia breaks the tense silence to demand the whereabouts of her loyal attendant. The maid quickly informs her that Sir Alfred is currently out of the mansion on a vital errand. Realizing it is inappropriate to rely on a male attendant for private matters, Elia accepts the presence of the older woman introduced as Marge. Staring at the senior maid's familiar, wrinkled face, Elia remembers Marge as her former personal attendant who served her since her betrothal. A sickening betrayal twists in Elia's gut as she remembers seeing Marge fawning over Sylvia as if she were her true master. Unable to accept the agonizing isolation, she had once lodged a desperate complaint to her own mother, only to be kindly admonished to restrain herself. Marge steps forward with feigned concern, noting that her lady's face looks dangerously ashen and sick while staring at her ink-stained hands. Panicking, Marge scolds her for furiously scrubbing her stained skin with a filthy dusting cloth, prompting Elia to blankly apologize for the grotesque mess. Reassuring her lady that no apology is necessary, Marge politely insists on preparing a hot bath at once. Catching a slip of the tongue, Elia presses the hesitant maid on what exactly she was supposed to have remembered. Refusing to let the matter drop, Elia sharply commands Marge not to dodge the pressing question. Lowering her gaze, the loyal maid confesses she truly believed Elia would have long forgotten her name. A bright memory flashes by as a younger Elia eagerly shows off a fascinating book to a smiling Marge. Reflecting on their long history, Elia softly wonders why Marge assumed her defection to Sylvia's side would erase all her memories of her. Flashing a gentle, sorrowful smile, Elia earnestly thanks the stunned maid for always treating her with true kindness. A dark realization settles over her as she remembers that the loyal maid ultimately chose to cut her off by her own will. Slipping into the scalding bathwater, a despondent Elia stares blankly at the ceiling as dark thoughts threaten to drown her. Listening to the rhythmic splashing, she quietly notes how the falling water droplets perfectly mimic a gloomy rain shower. Suddenly collapsing against the cold tiles in a twisted vision, a battered Elia realizes with horrifying clarity that she is dying all over again. Trapped in a sickening blur of pain, she desperately questions if her demise is the result of illness, an injury, or her own hands. Begging for release from the endless torment, she weakly prays to abandon her shattered body and finally find peace. Crying out to an empty void, she desperately sends her pleas to any lingering god despite knowing she is utterly alone. A sudden, sharp gasp tears through her lips as the suffocating darkness closes in. Drifting through the endless abyss, she bitterly reflects on how long she has spent waiting for his arrival. Clinging to a singular, agonizing purpose, she vows that she must tell him the exact reason she was never loved. Accepting the cruel reality of her existence, she acknowledges the chilling truth behind why her own parents brutally abandoned her for Sylvia. Utterly defeated by the crushing weight of her repeating lives, she finally whispers that she has endured more than enough. A terrifying silence falls over the bathroom as a violent flurry of bubbles erupts from the depths of the tub. Thrashing weakly beneath the water, she is paralyzed by a blinding, suffocating pain as her lungs scream for air. The heavy bathroom doors violently swing open as the panicked maids shriek in absolute horror at the sight of their drowning lady. Frantically dragging her coughing body from the water, the maids desperately tend to Ilya while she curses her own humiliating blunder. Trembling violently as water cascades down her shivering frame, Ilya barely registers the frantic, tearful cries of her terrified servants. Shattering the chaos, a breathless Sir Alfred violently barges into the bathroom while a furious Marge desperately shields her lady. Completely ignoring the maid's furious protests, Alfred sweeps a stunned, dripping Ilya into his powerful arms. Glaring fiercely at the trembling servants, Alfred demands to know why they foolishly abandoned her just because she ordered them to. Sternly rejecting their weak apologies, the furious knight coldly lectures them that blind obedience is a fatal flaw for a guardian. Yielding to his overwhelming protective presence, a weak Ilia gazes up at Alfred and softly entrusts herself to his care. As Marge bows her head in deep, sincere apology, Ilia gently reassures the weeping maid that the terrifying ordeal was entirely her own fault. Startled by her maid's gentle question about why she is so kind-hearted, Ilia quietly chastises herself for her past dramatic attempts at despair. A haunting vision of her mother surfaces, painfully reminding Ilia that she was raised to be exactly this fragile and obedient. The phantom echo of her mother commands her to remain a proper lady at all times, driving Ilia to desperately wonder if she is fulfilling that heavy expectation. Her mother coldly reveals she received a report about the bathtub incident, casually asking if Ilia is feeling unwell while ignoring her deep suffering. Complaining that Sylvia's illness is already too much to handle, her mother ruthlessly orders Ilia not to become another troublesome burden. The heavy, suffocating silence stretches endlessly as her name hangs bitterly in the cold air, leaving her totally consumed by the shadows of her own despair. A painful memory flares of her mother hugging her younger self, cruelly declaring she can no longer pamper the girl now destined to marry Soleil. Seeing Al awkwardly bow his head in apology, she snaps out of her daze and bitterly questions why everyone constantly apologizes to her. Al grimly regrets not stopping the maid, allowing Ilia to calmly deduce that Marge was the one who leaked the bathtub incident to her mother. Staring blankly ahead, she justifies Marge's naive betrayal by explaining the maid genuinely believed a mother would rush to save her child. Echoing a desperate plea from a forgotten past life, she extends a trembling hand toward her loyal knight and softly begs him to hold it. Watching him freeze in utter hesitation, she swiftly pulls her hand back with a hollow, self-deprecating chuckle. Masking her shattered heart, she asks the hesitant knight to simply stand by and listen to her tragic tale of remaining forever unloved. Gazing out into the moonlit gardens, she begins weaving a deeply personal narrative meant to expose the fractured history of her family. A heavy sorrow drips from her words as she lays bare the absolute core of her suffering, coldly defining her existence as a girl who was never loved. Pausing her bleak recounting, she turns a piercing, shadowed gaze toward the silent knight to ask if he ever truly understood her cursed reality. While Al stammers in mild confusion, she smoothly pushes past his uncertainty to deliver a sharp, undisputed truth about her royal sister. A radiant vision of a smiling Sylvia bursts into her mind, completely embodying the pampered royalty she is treated as every single day. Staring into the void, she accepts the bitter cosmic law that Sylvia is the undisputed protagonist of this world, leaving Ilia as a mere supporting character. A morbid curiosity flashes across her face as she likens her agonizing, repetitive existence to a twisted piece of fiction. Shifting her gaze to a worn book resting on her lap, she quietly asks her knight if he recognizes the highly popular title. Tracing the cover, she questions what moral could possibly be learned from a wildly popular tale of a common knight loving a forbidden princess. Trying to brush off the uncomfortable tension, Al dismisses the book as a painfully generic piece of romantic fiction. Dropping a massive bombshell, she smoothly reveals that this seemingly frivolous romance novel actually belonged to her strict, unfeeling father. While Al visibly reels from the impossible revelation, a dark, triumphant smirk creeps across her lips as she boldly confesses her thievery. Breaking her usual somber demeanor, a genuine, melodious laugh escapes her lips, leaving Al to manage a nervous, bewildered chuckle. A heavy shadow falls over her face as she silently acknowledges that Sylvia would be instantly forgiven for this crime, whereas she would face severe punishment. Her mind violently plunges back into a forgotten timeline, searching for the exact moment she first laid eyes on the forbidden text. In a doomed past life where she actually married Soleil, she arrived seeking crucial guidance only to find her father had callously abandoned his post for Sylvia. Staring at the massive doors of his empty study, she miserably repeats her lifelong mantra that nothing can be helped when it comes to her sister. Questioning her own inexplicable actions, Ilia reflects on the moments leading up to her approaching her father's study. Driven by a subconscious urge, she reaches out for the heavy doorknob to see what lies within. Stepping into the shadowed room, she marvels that the door simply opened when it normally requires a key. Her gaze zeroes in on a specific section of the towering bookshelves, drawn to a hidden truth. Apologizing internally to Al, She questions why she was suddenly so interested in a spot she would normally never investigate. Explaining the strange phenomenon to Al, she describes a massive, invisible force driving her to find it and politely asks him not to pry further. After Al respectfully apologizes for overstepping his boundaries, she internally notes that most people would write off such an inexplicable event as divine guidance. Resting quietly in her bed with the mysterious book in hand, she gently calls out to her loyal attendant. Following her request to flip to the final page, Al uncovers a hidden portrait that immediately leaves her stunned. A beautifully drawn sketch of a woman fills the page, bearing an uncanny and undeniable resemblance to Sylvia. Correcting Al's assumption, she explains that her father's dated signature proves the portrait was drawn long before Sylvia was even born. Staring at the ethereal face, she reveals that the woman is actually Sylvia's biological mother, a figure known to very few. Driven by burning questions, she explains how she pulled strings to locate the book's author and uncover why this exact portrait was hidden inside. She shockingly reveals that the novel's dramatic romance between a knight and a princess is actually the true, forbidden love story of her own father. Despite knowing the characters are not entirely fictional, she hesitates to tell Al the full truth, fearing it might severely impact the road ahead. A sudden, horrific premonition violently invades her mind, taunting her that Al's unwavering loyalty is exactly what got him killed. Startled by a sudden knock at the door, she is pulled back from her dark thoughts as Al quietly checks in on her. Shaken by the gruesome vision, she abruptly cuts the conversation short and tells a confused Al that they will continue later. With the mysterious crow now gone, she realizes that Al is the only person left in the world whom she can trust with all her heart. Feeling her fragile heart desperately pleading for help, she resolves to cherish his life and never carelessly drag him down with her. The quiet atmosphere shatters as a frantic Sylvia bursts into the bedroom, horrified by rumors that her older sister nearly drowned in the bath. Panting heavily from her rush, Sylvia earnestly presents a warm herbal decoction prepared by their mother. Smiling warmly, Sylvia playfully admits the medicine tastes terrible but begs her to keep that a secret from their mother. Staring at the steaming cup, she hesitates slightly before accepting the bitter drink from her radiant sister. Blushing slightly, Sylvia quickly apologizes for her sudden intrusion, explaining she rushed over because her sister looked so terribly cold. Reaching out with genuine affection, Sylvia gently places her warm hands over her sister's pale fingers. The sudden, tender contact sends a complicated shiver through the older sister's weary body. Staring at their intertwined fingers, she silently reflects that these same warm hands systematically robbed her of everything she ever loved. Despite the bitter resentment, she cannot forget that there was also a time when those exact hands fiercely protected her. The phantom voice of Crow cruelly mocks her from the shadows, laughing at how easily a simple touch is all it takes for her to completely forgive Sylvia. Standing solemnly in the grand hall, Ilya steels herself for the unfolding social encounters. Breaking the tense silence, Soleil awkwardly suggests they share a meal together sometime. Though entirely unthrilled by his stiff invitation, Ilya listens to the surrounding nobles gossiping excitedly about her and Lord Soleil. Realizing that a public rejection would severely damage the young Marquis's reputation, a deeply reluctant Ilya knows she cannot refuse. Stepping smoothly into the tense atmosphere, the charismatic Scion Topias flashes a bright, disarming smile. Bowing gracefully to signify her lower rank, Ilya introduces herself while carefully analyzing the foreign noble's intense gaze. Convinced he is secretly mocking her beneath his polite facade, Ilya maintains perfect composure as Scion formally states his name. A sudden, sharp realization strikes Soleil as his eyes widen in total shock. Shaking off his bewilderment, Soleil dismisses the strange moment as a mere coincidence and smoothly redirects them toward lunch. The trio silently navigates the sprawling, sunlit corridors toward the bustling dining hall. Staring at her fiancé's retreating back, Ilya bitterly remembers how the Soleil of her past lives used to wait patiently for her. The heavy wooden doors swing open to reveal a massive, chattering cafeteria packed with noble students. Casually resting his chin on his hand, Scion notes her rare cafeteria appearances and pointedly asks where she usually eats. Suspecting he already knows the tragic truth, Ilya defensively admits she usually dines entirely alone. As Scion confirms her isolated habits with a knowing smirk, Ilya internally curses her own foolish vulnerability. Plunging into a bittersweet memory, Ilya recalls how her heart once soared when Soleil offered to share his meals with her. Shattering the nostalgic illusion, Sion bluntly observes the bizarre, unnatural tension lingering between the engaged couple. Leaning forward with a piercing gaze, the foreign noble boldly points out they act more like total strangers than future spouses. While a flustered Soleil commands his friend to shut up, a hollow Ilya internally agrees with the brutal assessment. Watching the two boys bicker, she painfully realizes this agonizing encounter is merely casual banter to her oblivious fiancé. Staring into Soleil's expectant eyes, Ilya realizes she is the only one paralyzed by this mundane social ritual. Forcing a perfect smile, she accepts the luncheon invitation simply to play the role of an ideal, obedient fiancé. The fragile peace instantly shatters when Sion cheerfully proposes they drag the beloved Sylvia into their private meals. Paralyzed by a sudden spike of terror, Ilya stares blankly ahead as her carefully constructed reality begins to crumble. Studying Sion's flawless, smiling mask, Ilya detects no open malice but knows the dangerous predator is testing her. Recognizing the treacherous political game, she realizes he is ruthlessly probing her defenses to uncover her true nature. Trapped by her own desperate need to appear as a loving sister, a defeated Ilya completely surrenders her right to object. A suffocating wave of panic crashes over her as a primal instinct screams at her to turn and run for her life. The terrifying hallucination vanishes instantly when Soleil excitedly calls out Sylvia's name across the crowded hall. A familiar, agonizing despair consumes Ilya as she watches Soleil stare at her younger sister with utter, intoxicating devotion. Ilya instantly realizes she is being completely cut out from Soleil's world the moment Sylvia appears, connecting the painful feeling to rumors of him eating with another woman. Flustered and blushing furiously, Sylvia quickly denies the implication and stammers that it wasn't what it looked like. Watching their interaction, Ilya feels completely shut out, sensing they exist in a separate, closed-off world she cannot intervene with. Gripping her teacup tightly, Ilya bitterly accepts she isn't even a supporting character, resigning herself to being a mere bystander in their unfolding story. The surrounding academy crowd gossips excitedly, cooing over how adorable Sylvia is while noting Lord Soleil's captivated expression. Acknowledging her sister's universal appeal, Ilya silently agrees that Sylvia possesses a charming cuteness that makes everyone want to protect her. Soleil turns his attention back, lightly pointing out that she was just with her elder sister. As a dark-haired man smoothly invites Sylvia to sit down, Ilya bitterly realizes she isn't someone her sister needs to watch out for. Startled by the sudden attention, Sylvia gasps before nervously asking Ilya if she is feeling any better. Ilya wonders if she chose the wrong words, deducing that Sylvia is actually more worried about last night's mysterious events than her physical health. When Sylvia nervously claims nothing happened, Ilya regrets carelessly bringing up a confidential topic and politely apologizes to her sister. Soleil quickly intervenes with a smile, asking Ilya why she is apologizing so much and telling her there is no need to make such a guilty face. Gripping her dress in anxiety, Ilya wonders if her expression was unpleasant, fearing the others assumed she was glaring maliciously at Sylvia. Maintaining a stoic and cold facade, Ilya quietly asks the men not to bother her sister too much. Seeing Sylvia look troubled, Ilya intuitively tries covering for her, prompting Soleil to laugh and remark on her supposedly fierce reputation. The dark-haired man coldly tells Soleil he can't sense the malice aimed at Ilya, brushing off Soleil's playful accusation that he's always up to something. Onlookers whisper about the rare sight of the two sisters standing together, wondering if Ilya is getting publicly lectured by the surrounding men. Ilya reflects on her past lives, realizing she used to be the exact type of vile, jealous girl who would unsightfully shackle those around her. Soleil warmly pats Sylvia's head, prompting Ilya to firmly state that neither she nor Sylvia should mind the situation. Sylvia blushes deeply in surprise as Soleil calls her precious, leaving Ilya watching the tender romance unfold before her. Excusing herself for classes, Ilya walks away while agonizing over why Sylvia betrayed her despite their mutual trust and deep sisterly love. A dark silhouette fills Ilya's mind as she distinctly remembers the intense, burning hatred she used to harbor back then. She resigns herself to her tragic fate, admitting she naturally acts like an ugly person unable to hide her deep resentment. Desperate to throw away her muddled emotions, she recalls bestowing all her knowledge upon the very person who ruined her. Remembering their happy days, Ilya recalls warming up to Sylvia for the first time as her little sister enthusiastically thanked her for learning new things. However, All of Elia's agonizing effort that drove her to cough blood was ultimately treated as mere knowledge to conveniently pass down. She struggles to find the words to describe the agonizing emptiness of being forced to let go and give everything away to her sister. Having willingly sacrificed everything, she admits she just didn't want to believe all her exhaustive efforts were a complete waste of time. Staring blankly as she descends the stairs, Elia calls herself a fool while struggling to place a completely forgotten voice. A sharp click echoes from her shoe as she descends, wondering who spoke those mysterious words to her and what they truly meant. Elia trips and begins falling, her hands desperately grasping at the empty air as a voice screams for her to watch out. Just before disaster strikes, a mysterious young man steps in and yanks her to safety. Her eyes fly open in shock as she is pressed against him, hearing the heavy thumping of a heartbeat. Gasping for breath on the staircase, she stammers a frantic thank you to the stranger who caught her. Fearing the scandal if someone saw them holding each other, she gently pushes him away and insists she is fine. Relieved that the hallway is empty, she straightens her dress and prepares to formally express her gratitude. Her polite words die in her throat as she looks up, recognizing the man standing before her. Staring at his distinct reddish-brown hair, she instantly identifies him as Lord Soleil's close friend. She recalls how he and Soleil were inseparable academy companions who joined the same night unit, though she rarely spoke to him directly. Remembering his past unfriendly glares, she offers a swift word of thanks and tries to flee, only to have him command her to wait. Blocking her escape on the stairs, the knight nervously stammers as he struggles to find his words. He awkwardly breaks the silence, asking if she is perhaps feeling unwell. Stunned by his sudden concern, her mind flashes back to her wedding day when he ignored her to tell Sylvia she looked like a princess. In that painful memory, he smugly defended Soleil's coldness, claiming the groom simply could not openly compliment Sylvia in front of his new bride. She remembers how his insensitive justification deeply wounded her on what should have been her happiest day. Confused by his current demeanor, she wonders why a man who once viewed her as a mere obstacle is suddenly showing care. She firmly insists she is fine, though his unexpected questioning makes her realize she might actually be feeling under the weather. The knight's pitying voice echoes darkly from a forgotten timeline. A grim vision emerges of her lying broken in a filthy prison cell, mocked by him for still putting her faith in Soleil. Clinging to the cold iron bars in agonizing pain, she listens to the knight cruelly inform her that Soleil will never come. Her fingers grow numb as the grueling hours stretch on, making a mockery of her desperate hopes. Bleeding at the brink of death, she wonders why he continues to verbally stab her by declaring she can never win against fate. He coldly insists that Soleil and Sylvia are destined for each other, his usually brilliant hair looking dull from the shadows of her cell. Crushed against the unforgiving stone floor, she absorbs his devastating verdict that all her efforts have been utterly pointless. Despite the harsh reality of his message, she confusingly notes that his final words were full of compassion. Snapped back to the present, she stares at the knight before her, realizing her foolishness in trying to decipher his past intentions. The reddish-brown-haired knight leans in closer, visibly troubled as he notes that Lady Elia has gone as pale as a ghost. Terrified by the sudden resurgence of their singular prison encounter, she trembles while questioning why this man stands before her now. The traumatic memories of her miserable final moments rush back in an overwhelming flash, paralyzing her completely. As the concerned knight calls out her name, Elia realizes with chilling certainty that something around them is already changing. Recalling a dark memory, Elia remembers a man's cruel laughter as he coldly told her it was better to give up and die. To her utter bewilderment, the man from her grim memory suddenly shed tears of sorrow. A single, sorrowful apology broke through the oppressive silence as a teardrop fell. Believing herself to be a mere criminal causing her friend grief, she initially thought he had come to the prison solely to mock her. She logically realizes that ordinary nobles would never willingly step foot into such a filthy, heavily guarded prison. Still unable to figure out his true motives, she deduces he must have spent a fortune bribing the guards just to weep and apologize over her impending death. A horrifying realization begins to dawn on her as she pieces the grim puzzle together. She suspects that a hidden enemy deliberately exploited Sylvia's tragic death to falsely accuse her and eliminate a perceived nuisance. Determined to rewrite her grim fate, she vows to make Sylvia's well-being her ultimate objective, knowing she cannot be executed if her sister lives. Staring into a seemingly clear future, she questions if her choices are truly her own or just the lingering emptiness of a life robbed of everything. she melancholically reminisces about the days she abandoned everything to escape to a distant place. Returning to the grand estate, Elia is promptly greeted by her loyal servant, Al. Noticing her unusual daytime return, Al expresses concern and politely asks if she is feeling unwell. With a heavy, melancholic gaze, she quietly admits to her lingering discomfort. Explaining that she returned to rest, she listens as Al gently points out how relentlessly she has been overworking herself. When Al graciously offers to escort her to her room, she attempts to dismiss him so he can focus on his own duties. Realizing the sheer magnitude of her exhausting and seemingly vain efforts, she feels the sharp sting of Al's genuine worry. Al tenderly offers her a cup of tea, but his profound kindness only amplifies the painful ache in her chest. She turns her attention to the special herbal tea leaves her mother exclusively infused for Sylvia to drink. A deep wave of sorrow washes over her as she remembers her mother never once blending tea for her. Sensing her sorrow, Al promises to bring her rare tea leaves from a merchant, prompting her to wonder if her bitter resentment was too obvious. Meeting her melancholic gaze, Al sincerely reassures her that he will procure the rare gift next time. She accepts his offer, silently acknowledging that she only covets the leaves because of the sentimental value of receiving them as a gift. She vividly recalls Sylvia playfully complaining about the tea's bitter taste, realizing she has no right to criticize a daughter's innocent gripes. Choking back her bitter envy, she forces herself to repress the painful truth that her mother never showed her such warmth. Retreating into the lonely silence of her grand bedroom, she sits rigidly on the edge of her bed. She delicately inspects the beautiful ribbon Sylvia carefully wrapped around the jar of tea leaves. Clutching the jar, she fiercely reminds herself that her sister bears absolutely no blame for this agonizing disparity. Desperation leaks into her thoughts as she emphatically clears the innocent girl of any wrongdoing. Like a desperate magical incantation, she mutters the absolution over and over to force herself to believe it. Taking a deep breath, Elia marvels at the refreshing, slightly sour yet gentle scent of flora filling her lungs. The peaceful moment abruptly shatters as a violent cough racks her frame, forcing her to double over in sudden discomfort. Dismissing the sudden attack as merely breathing in stray dust, she quickly regains her composed posture. Her sharp gaze locks onto a mysterious small glass jar resting quietly on the table near the grand clock. Staring blankly, she wishes she existed completely alone in this world to escape the cycle of pain, drawing a bitter comparison to her past life trapped in a small brothel room. A vivid flashback reveals a young dark-haired boy handing her medicine while she lay in bed, reminding her that she was never truly alone back then. The grim memory continues as a black market doctor gravely warns her that he can only numb her advanced pain, handing her a highly potent prescription. The doctor sternly cautions that a healthy body would violently reject the strong drug, describing its sharp herbal scent and grim resemblance to fresh blood splatter. Snapped back to the present, she chillingly recognizes the slightly sweet, sharp scent lingering heavily in the air. Absolute shock freezes her delicate features as the horrifying realization finally dawns upon her. Her widening eyes lock onto the glass jar, confirming it contains the exact same deadly red drug from her tragic past. Her mind plunges into a painful childhood memory of sneaking out of her room, only to hear her mother proudly declare Sylvia as her ultimate treasure. Standing as a tiny, heartbroken shadow outside the heavy doors, young Elia desperately wonders what she means to her own mother. That agonizing childhood question still haunts her mind as a young maid nervously enters the room to serve freshly prepared tea. Dismissing the intrusion with calm grace, Elia listens as the maid explains that Sir Alfred reported her feeling unwell. Seizing a sudden opportunity, Elia smoothly asks the anxious servant to perform a specific favor. She instructs the maid to summon the cleaning staff, specifically requesting the person directly responsible for managing the estate's keys. Attempting to mask her true intentions from the shocked servant, Elia quickly attributes her strange request to an unfounded sense of personal concern. Her mind traces back to last week when Sylvia collapsed from a sudden fever, an incident the doctor easily dismissed as mere academy fatigue. A sudden knock shatters her dark musings, revealing the nervous maid who brought the keys herself due to the manager's absence. Recognizing the servant as a girl who frequently laughs alongside Sylvia, Elia silently accepts the jingling set of keys. She coldly observes the maid's palpable fear, a stark contrast born from Elia's strict aristocratic upbringing compared to Sylvia's carefree friendships. Trembling as she hands over the keys, the maid nervously stammers that she must officially report this action to the Lord. Elia sharply deduces that the head steward is already aware of her movements, intentionally sending a young maid to monitor her access to restricted rooms. Giving the servant full permission to report her actions, Elia turns away while completely ignoring the panicked girl's desperate pleas to stop. She cynically accepts that no matter what catastrophic events unfold, Sylvia and her mother will always continue laughing in their unmoving, absurd reality. Approaching the heavy doors to freely enter her sister's room, she is immediately struck by the startling realization that Lady Sylvia is not there. Turning her cold gaze toward the trailing servant, Elia sharply orders the trembling girl to leave before she gets severely reprimanded. She cleverly deduces that the estate staff deployed this young maid as an emergency pawn, ready to silence her if Elia committed any outrageous acts. Stepping into the shadowy room as the maid desperately screams her name, Elia reflects that they are both tragically trapped living in this cruel, unforgiving world. Seeking answers, Elia approaches a startled maid to ask where Sylvia stores the special tea leaves their mother gifted her. Ignoring the servant's panicked protests, she steps right up to Sylvia's ornate, teddy bear-covered dresser. Opening the beautifully decorated jar, Elia bitterly notes the stark contrast between this treasure and her own simple packaging. She pops the cork and takes a deep breath, letting the scent confirm her darkest suspicions. A vibrant memory of Sylvia joyfully declaring her love for their mother flashes through Elia's mind. Tormented by the jarring disconnect, she frantically questions why their mother would harbor resentment towards such a happy child. Consumed by blinding jealousy, Elia desperately yearns for the pure, unconditional love that illuminates her sister's pitch-black world. Her thoughts violently spiral out of control as she admits just how desperate she is to receive that exact same affection. The terrified maid lunges for the jar, screaming for her lady to stop messing with Sylvia's precious belongings. Fiercely ordering the servant away, Elia mourns her sister's fading hair color while wishing she were the one receiving their mother's gentle strokes. Stumbling down the seemingly straight hallway, she feels trapped in an elaborate maze and utterly terrified by an unseen presence. Startled by a sudden encounter, Elia stops dead in her tracks with a look of pure, unadulterated dread. An echoing memory claims that those who have completely given up on everything display the absolute best smiles. Confronting her mother with the stolen jar, Elia listens as the matriarch explains that the helpless show defeat by smiling. Shocked by her mother's unusually strict reprimand, Elia realizes she has never been spoken to in such a harsh, direct manner. Feigning innocence, the older woman smoothly dismisses the jar's contents as mere medical herbs. Shattering the jar across the floor, Elia demands to know if her mother truly understands the deadly nature of those herbs. Unfazed by the outburst, her mother coldly retorts that she obviously knows what she created. Calling Elia a truly foolish child, the matriarch smiles with chilling condescension. The crushing realization of her mother's true, dark nature violently shatters Elia's fragile world. Desperately confronting the older woman, Elia demands to know why a mother who supposedly loves her precious princess would poison her. Pleading internally for a refutation, Elia desperately hopes her mother will deny the lethal accusations. Dismissing the danger, the matriarch states Sylvia won't die, calling her a very precious princess before shifting her chilling gaze back to Elia. Dropping her facade entirely, the mother bluntly declares that Sylvia is simply no good and never should have enrolled in the academy. Elia fiercely defends her sister's efforts, but her mother coldly states that a promise to her husband prevented her from violently objecting to the enrollment. Conceding that Sylvia begged relentlessly, the matriarch explains how her husband eventually relented to the girl's wishes. Staring ominously at Elia, the mother admits she is very much aware of her actions and knows exactly what she must do next. Condemning Sylvia's newfound liveliness at the academy, the older woman chillingly states she made the princess drink the brew to forcefully suppress her. Snapping completely, the matriarch glares with manic intensity, screaming that Sylvia's lively behavior is precisely why she is no good. Without warning, the mother draws a hidden blade and violently slashes her own throat as a horrified Elia watches. A sudden, sickening splatter of black blood erupts across the scene. Elia stands frozen in a massive pool of blood as a woman collapses to the floor beside her. Wide-eyed and utterly bewildered, Elia gasps in pure shock at the gruesome sight. Unable to comprehend the sudden horror, she stares down and stammers out to her mother. Staring at the blood-soaked blade abandoned on the floor, she desperately questions why this is happening. Slumping to her knees in despair, Elia agonizingly realizes this nightmare defies everything she thought she knew about the future. Blood violently gushes from the older woman's fatal neck wound as Elia slowly reaches out her trembling hands. Gasping for air, she touches the horrific injury, her mind spiraling into absolute silence. She sits completely paralyzed beside her mother's motionless, ruined body. Weakly turning her head, the dying woman chokes out Elia's name through blood-stained lips. Elia snaps to horrific attention as her mother forces out a raspy, dying apology. Desperately shaking her, Elia begs her mother to stay awake and promises everything will be all right. The dying woman leans in and whispers a final, chilling secret directly into her daughter's ear. With a heavy thud, her mother's hand falls lifelessly to the floor, leaving Elia trembling with blood-soaked fingers. Lost in the traumatic void, she faintly wonders if she screamed out loud or made any sound at all during the slaughter. Unaware of the carnage, a maid and a butler cautiously approach the madam's open door, noting the unusually heavy atmosphere. Peeking inside, the butler freezes in utter shock as he registers the gruesome scene surrounding his lady. Snapping into action, the butler fiercely commands the bewildered maid to immediately run and summon the Lord. Bursting into the room, a furious man screams at Elia, demanding to know what she did to her mother. Completely shattered, Elia blankly stammers that she did absolutely nothing to cause this bloodshed. Her mind races back to the confrontation, recalling that she simply asked what her mother slipped into Sylvia's tea before the terrifying confession. Staring down in pure revulsion, she realizes her face and hands are entirely sullied by her mother's freshly spilled blood. When Elia numbly asks to wash her hands, the enraged Lord raises his fist to strike her, prompting Al to surge forward. Al fiercely blocks the strike while another servant vehemently declares that Elia had absolutely nothing to do with the murder. The furious Lord immediately demands to know if they saw anything, but the brave servant firmly denies witnessing the crime. Stepping firmly between them, Al formally apologizes for his impertinence before demanding a wider, multifaceted investigation into the murder. The tense confrontation shatters as a guard sprints into the room, whispering an urgent emergency directly into the Lord's ear. Al narrows his eyes in cold suspicion as the distracted Lord swiftly turns to leave the blood-soaked room. With the aggressor gone, Al immediately commands a deeply traumatized Elia to quickly return to her room. Uniformed guards briskly march down the grand hallway, fully mobilized by the sudden chaos enveloping the sprawling estate. A guard impatiently barks at a young man named Al to hurry up, completely oblivious to the bloodied and silent Elia sitting nearby. Elia silently notes that while Al might have heard rumors of a grim incident, he likely remains blissfully ignorant of her mother's gruesome fate. Her thoughts drift to her mother's tragic reality as a mere political pawn, abandoned in a foreign land to monitor a knight hopelessly in love with a princess. The scene abruptly shifts to a rainy garden where a distressed Sylvia confronts Elia, asking if the rumors about her stealing the tea leaves are true. Standing coldly under a black umbrella, Elia blankly questions if Sylvia is referring to the items her mother supposedly gave her. Desperate for reassurance, the younger girl leans in and pleads with her sister, clinging to the naive belief that she wouldn't commit such a vile act. Unmoved by the emotional plea, Elia coldly challenges her sister's blind faith, demanding to know why she assumes her innocence. A dark, intimidating intensity shadows Elia's face as she fiercely demands to know how her sister can blindly believe in her. She bluntly declares that the malicious rumors might just be telling the truth, threatening to shatter Sylvia's innocent illusions. Shaken to her core, Sylvia furiously shakes her head and insists that her older sister simply isn't the type of person to do something so cruel. Sylvia stubbornly defends her sister's underlying kindness, even while admitting that everyone else suspects her of harming their mother. Elia silently agonizes over her cursed luck, having desperately hoped to avoid seeing Sylvia and their mutual brother together on this miserable day. Bitter memories surface of the foreign princess carrying their father's secret child, prompting Elia's grim confession that she did indeed steal the precious item. Looking down at the fragile younger girl, Elia coldly and explicitly admits that she stole everything from her. The devastating confession hangs heavy in the rainy air, leaving the heartbroken Sylvia completely paralyzed with shock. A bitter, deep-seated resentment bubbles up inside Elia as she glares at her younger sibling and questions the very foundation of their twisted relationship. With a cruel and dismissive smile, Elia casually reminds the stunned Sylvia that she is guilty of doing the exact same thing. Sylvia frantically backpedals and denies taking anything from anyone, desperately hoping her sister is just making a twisted joke. As Sylvia continues to sob her innocence, Elia silently reflects on the agonizing reality of her younger half-sister's mere existence. A fierce, internal rage consumes Elia as she screams in her mind that Sylvia's very birth robbed her of everything that was rightfully hers. She bitterly recounts how the disguised princess stole her father and secretly bore his child, dooming Elia to a life of misery. Her heart breaks remembering the genuine joy on her father's face as he cradled his secret child, a betrayal that forever shattered her own mother's composure. She envisions the agonizing contrast of her own mother holding her as a newborn while forced to watch her husband dote on his illegitimate family. The painful flashback suddenly shatters as a frustrated young man rushes onto the scene, demanding to know what is going on in the pouring rain. Violently snapping back to the present, Elia aggressively slaps away her brother's outstretched hand before he can comfort her. She fiercely warns him not to dirty his beautiful hands by touching her blood-bathed body. Ignoring her violent rejection, the determined young man steps forward and firmly grabs her trembling hand. Elia stares blankly as the young man eventually positions himself protectively beside the fragile and sobbing Sylvia. A crushing despair settles over her as she realizes that his gentle touch was never meant for her, and that he will inevitably choose her pure sister. Left completely isolated in the pouring rain, she stares into the void and wonders what a broken pawn like her is even supposed to do now. Elia breaks down, crying out into the void as she begs to know how she is expected to live when no one will stay by her side. A fleeting thought of someone staying by her side flashes through her mind as she despairs. The dying mother's voice rings out, apologizing and revealing her true feelings only in her very last moments. A devastating realization hits as Elia understands her mother loved someone else all along. Staring at her mother's lifeless body, Elia admits she couldn't look away because she desperately hoped it was all a joke. Even though she knew she had nothing, Elia confesses she believed her mother would finally show her love at the very end. She reflects on how she survived by telling herself that her family was simply hiding their deep affection. Her desperate internal plea to her father is violently interrupted when a voice screams her name. Looking at Sylvia's tearful face, Elia admits that she is the reason her sister is crying. Tears stream down her own face as she acknowledges the pain she has caused. The dark realization solidifies that she has truly messed everything up. Welcoming the darkness, Elia feels her vision fading and thinks it would be better if the world simply ended. A sharp voice cuts through the despair, declaring that an impossibly tangled thread must be dealt with. The voice coldly asserts that the only way to fix the tangle is to cut it and tie it back together. In a quiet study, a young man leans back and casually remarks that his brother sounds like he's in a tough spot. He looks over at his exhausted brother, asking if he is all right. The younger brother notices the tea, asking if it's the brew their mother used to make while noting that people are trying to exploit his brother's youth with fraudulent contracts. Wondering about the safety of the old tea, he questions if it's really okay to drink leaves that have been stored for so many years. A portrait of a faceless woman looms over the room as he asks just how many tea leaves she left behind. The older brother stares at the portrait, a somber look crossing his face as he thinks of their mother. The younger brother breaks the tension by jokingly calling him Big Bro. Annoyed by the creepy nickname, the older brother tells him to stop, noting it's unusual for his sibling to act this way. The younger brother hands over a sealed letter, his expression turning serious. Recognizing the seal, the older brother realizes the letter is from his fiancée and that his sibling is teasing him. The younger brother questions why the letter was hidden under a pile of paperwork and asks why his older brother is still unmarried at his age. He pushes further, asking if the engagement is just a bother or if his brother actually plans to go through with it. The older brother finally admits he feels a little bad because too much has happened over the past few years. He details the tragedies, stating that their family is crumbling after their grandparents were killed when their carriage fell down a cliff. He adds that just before graduation he received news that their father was killed in a war overseas, noting that misfortune comes in waves. The younger brother stares intently, realizing that his older brother's hesitation stems from thinking about the deaths of their mother and father. The light-haired brother asks Soleil if he truly wishes for a relationship like their parents, noting they were considered the ultimate dream couple. Soleil recalls returning early from the academy to find his mother grieving, realizing she had already lost her will to live long before her illness ultimately took her. In a vivid flashback, a young Soleil gently reassures his bedridden mother about the ongoing war, confidently insisting their superior country will never lose. Just as his mother weakly agrees, A panicked servant bursts through the heavy doors with a terrified scream of, "Madam!" Confused by the sudden intrusion, Soleil turns around just as a look of absolute, soul-crushing horror overtakes his mother's frail face. Trembling violently, his mother clutches a crumpled dispatch as she struggles to comprehend the devastating words written within. She collapses into agonizing sobs behind her hands, leaving a young Soleil to silently witness her shattering realization that her husband is dead. Returning to the present, Soleil explains that a woman claiming to be their mother's sister once lived with them, arriving half-dead and sparking rumors of divine retribution. With her mind severely muddled, the fragile aunt tragically mistook young Soleil for his father, eagerly asking the boy to read her a book. Initially suspecting she was a fraud from the slums, Soleil secretly snuck into her room only to realize her mentally regressed, youthful face undeniably proved she was their mother's true sister. Staring at her fragile form, Soleil desperately wanted to believe her claims despite the vast, contrasting differences in their physical features. Although he barely spoke to his aunt, her weak, trembling voice permanently imprinted on his heart as he deeply questioned his father's true feelings toward her. He vividly recalls the comical yet tragic sight of his father standing outside the sleeping aunt's room, repeatedly reaching for the doorknob only to forcefully retract his hand. During the aunt's final moments, his father finally confessed his convoluted feelings, spewing a hateful remark before bitterly thanking her for allowing his happiness with their mother. The light-haired brother Riley notes their shared family antics, while Soleil admits the aunt was unilaterally blamed and then forcefully forgiven for alleged sins. Plagued by a creeping sense of dread, young Soleil ran away from her room forever, haunted by the memory of his aunt tearing up whenever she saw his father's resemblance in his face. When his brother presses about a potential conflict between the adults, Soleil solemnly declares that conflict is the wrong word for the dark secret he is about to share. He reveals their mother's desperate, tearful confession where she admitted to lying about her own sister loving another man just so she could selfishly steal their father. Tears stream down their mother's face in the flashback as she agonizingly laments that her one desperate lie was a terrible, unforgivable mistake. Crushed by overwhelming guilt, she sobs that losing her beloved husband was absolute divine retribution for her treachery, an ultimate sin she could never atone for. A young, stoic Soleil silently absorbs the devastating weight of his mother's shattered reality. Broken beyond repair, his mother desperately whispers her futile wish to rewind time and redo absolutely everything from the very beginning. Returning to the stark present, Soleil bluntly shatters their mother's flawless image, declaring that she was never a saint but merely a deeply flawed human being. He asks his brother if he is disappointed in their parents, exposing a father bound by convoluted emotions and a mother consumed by lifelong regret. Processing the heavy generational trauma, the light-haired brother pointedly asks if this dark legacy is the true reason Soleil steadfastly refuses to marry. Soleil denies the assumption, admitting he is deeply afraid of marriage but has spent countless hours pondering how to ensure he never loses the woman he loves. When asked if he has finally found an answer, Soleil closes his eyes and solemnly confesses that no amount of endless pondering has given him a clear solution. Abandoning his internal struggle, Soleil decisively commands his brother to prepare to welcome his fiancée, admitting that his aunt's tragic figure always haunts him at life's crossroads. He nostalgically remembers humming a simple lullaby to his aunt, watching her flash a heartbreakingly envious, fleeting smile as if she had never known such basic kindness. Gently tracing the wax seal of a closed letter, Soleil's gaze softens as he reflects on the profound, lingering impact his aunt's memory holds over his ultimate decisions. A quiet reflection lingers on the sheer joy it brings to make someone truly happy. A gentle yet authoritative voice echoes in her memories, begging someone to hold the small hands of her precious, pitiful child. A deafening noise like a banging desk echoes within her, only for her to realize it is her own terrified heart as she registers the shocking revelation that it wasn't poison. A profound sense of dread washes over her as she contemplates the horrific gravity of what she has just done. Paralyzed by the heavy silence, she struggles to determine her next move as she weakly calls out for her mother. A chilling realization suddenly strikes her mind, bringing forth the horrifying thought that she has seen this exact tragedy unfold before. Her breath shakes the heavy air as the undeniable truth of the moment completely overwhelms her senses. Standing alone in the grand hall, she comes to the absolute certainty that time has reversed, bringing the nightmare back to life right before her eyes. She grimly accepts her cursed fate, fully aware that this is not the first time she has experienced this hellish loop. Fueled by desperate determination, She lunges forward and forcefully grabs her mother to alter the deadly course of events this time. A swift, violent slap sends an object clattering to the floor, sharply breaking the deadly sequence she remembers. Trembling hands desperately grip her mother's wrist as she chokes out a tearful, panicked plea. The shock of altering the timeline is eclipsed by the horrifying realization of her mother's frail, bone-thin wrist in her desperate grasp. The gruesome image of her mother's previous sudden death flashes in her mind, completely contrasting with the fragile, living woman standing before her now. Tears stream down her frantic face as she begs to know why her mother would commit such a desperate, unthinkable act. Her mother stares back with cold disbelief, stunned that Elia would seriously ask if she had tried to kill herself. The chilling accusation hangs in the air as her mother blames her entirely for driving Sylvia out of the mansion. Stunned by the revelation, Elia listens as her mother bitterly recounts how her fervent speech somehow moved their unyielding father to let Sylvia attend the academy. Ignoring Elia's questions, her mother accuses her of manipulating their father, fully revealing a dark resentment that had previously ended in suicide. A creeping sense of deep unease slithers into Elia's mind, twisting what should have been a victorious moment of salvation into something terrifying. She reflects on the brutal truth of her numerous regressions, acknowledging that her desperate wishes only ever twisted the path ahead and ruined her plans. A fleeting spark of hope ignites as she realizes this is the very first time she successfully bent the tragic past to her own will by saving her. The illusion of praise violently shatters as she looks into her mother's contempt-filled green eyes, realizing with absolute dread that she has made another catastrophic mistake. Her mother's face twists with bitter defeat as she mutters that their father always yielded to the demands of the princess. Elia attempts to argue that Sylvia wanted to go, but she is shut down by the sickening realization that her mother's intoxicated eyes remain utterly loyal to the dead princess. The crushing truth emerges that Sylvia had already given up on life and leaving the mansion, living as if she were already dead. Furious and heartbroken, Elia aggressively pins her mother down and demands to know if she was aware of Sylvia's agonizing despair all along. She screams in raw agony, completely appalled that her mother would intentionally lock away a child who had already surrendered to total hopelessness. Her mother coldly justifies the cruel confinement and the poison, citing Sylvia's frail body as nothing more than a convenient excuse to keep her permanently locked away. The mother calmly claims she loved the child dearly and cared for her carefully, but notes that Sylvia deeply envied healthy people and simply wanted to become healthy herself. The mother insists Sylvia is her sole daughter and will forever remain her cute little princess, prompting a sharp, disgusted reaction from Elia as the older woman suddenly realizes her mistake and cries out her name. With a darkened expression, Elia reaches forward, her voice breaking as she declares she never wanted any of this to happen. Slamming her mother down in desperate anguish, Elia violently begs her not to speak the incoming words. Weeping bitterly, Elia confesses she believed her mother was supposed to be hers alone until Sylvia was born, desperately pleading for her mother to lie and just once pretend she loved her. She screams into the tense silence, demanding her mother explicitly state her love for her. Elia realizes she cannot let her hands go, knowing that if she doesn't keep the woman's mouth sealed, her mother's imminent rejection would mean the absolute end of the world. Staring down into her mother's eyes with the vulnerable reflection of a small girl, she asks one final time if she truly loves her. A heartbreaking memory echoes of desperate servants pleading for someone to save the crying, sorrowful silhouette of a child from utter despair. A stern male voice violently shatters the memory, demanding to know if she truly meant to claim she had no intention to harm the girl. Staring forward with deadened eyes, Elia boldly and confidently confirms that she fully intended to kill her. The master viciously strikes Elia across the face before coldly dismissing her genuine attempt to apologize for the earlier confusion. Collapsing to the floor, Elia silently admits to herself that if the maid had not barged in, she really might have suffocated her mother, even as the master furiously questions her violent actions. Desperately trying to explain, Elia insists she did not want to take her life but merely wanted to physically stop her mother from answering the question. The tense standoff is abruptly interrupted when the observant maid glances over and notes that Elia appears to be injured. As the master mentions finding a weapon from the chaotic scuffle, Elia finally notices the throbbing pain radiating from a deep wound in her arm. The master furiously holds up a sharply stained, bloody knife, silently demanding an immediate explanation. The mother flashes a chilling, subtle smile as she smoothly claims the bloody weapon belongs to her, shocking the master. Staring blankly at her profusely bleeding arm, Elia is firmly told the deep wound might leave a permanent scar and that she needs to sit down immediately. As Elia violently wobbles on her feet, the mother calmly confirms ownership of the knife from her bed while the master hastily orders a doctor. The master suspiciously questions the innocent-looking mother about her exact intentions, noting there are far too many dangerous uses for a blade. Watching the older woman maintain her sickeningly sweet composure, Elia finally sees straight through her mother's flawless, deceptive mask. She realizes her mother will simply continue to smile as if the brutal violence meant absolutely nothing. Elia recognizes the terrifying extent of her mother's skill at perfectly hiding her true, darkest emotions. The mother casts a chillingly warm and perfectly crafted smile directly at the stunned girl. Suddenly grasping the sheer manipulation at play, Elia breathes out her mother's name in horrific realization. Shifting her flawless act to appear weak and pitiful, the mother falsely stammers out that she tried to kill herself. Falling completely for the vicious act, the enraged master furiously screams Elia's name and demands to know the meaning of this bloody disaster. Seizing Elia with terrifying force, the master violently demands to know what monstrous act she has committed, while Elia can only stare numbly at her mother. A dark, unhinged smile finally cracks across Elia's face as she asks if it is fine for her to try to violently protect herself now. Reflecting on her regression, Elia realizes her mother never explicitly denied loving her, yet her own words pierce her heart as she silently acknowledges the painful truth. She resolves to keep silent about her mother secretly drugging Sylvia's tea, knowing that everyone would easily believe she is merely a jealous thief who attacked her mother upon being discovered. Accepting her grim reality, she notes that her mother will never extend a helping hand and that both her parents will inevitably condemn her without hesitation. Facing the cold stares of her parents, Elia realizes she is completely alone and must fiercely protect herself. Staring down her father, she boldly interrupts his nonsense and demands to know if he has ever questioned the inadvertent suffering he has caused others. As she confronts him about the immense pain her mother is secretly enduring, her father's face contorts with confusion before he violently screams her name. He explodes in a blinding rage, screaming for her to stop and insisting she has absolutely no idea what she is talking about. Suddenly changing targets, the father snaps his attention down the hall and sharply calls out to a trembling maid named Marge. Elia zeroes in on the terrified servant, pressing her to confess that her mother had secretly entrusted her with something highly important. The mother turns pale with shock, desperately gasping out a demand to know how her daughter uncovered this hidden truth. Elia completely exposes the conspiracy, revealing that the maid is hiding a letter containing everything her father needs to know. Chaos erupts as her father demands to know the meaning of this revelation, furious at Elia for overstepping her bounds. Heartbroken, Elia turns back to her mother and asks if her total lack of support means she was never truly considered her child. Tears stream down her face as she emotionally breaks down, screaming in agony over why her own parents refuse to love her. The intense confrontation is abruptly interrupted when a fragile Sylvia wanders into the room, innocently asking what is wrong with her sister. Desperate to shield her, the father immediately commands Sylvia to stay back and return to her room. He strictly warns the confused girl not to take another step forward into the tense room. Completely ignoring the warning, Sylvia steps closer and softly questions why she should stay away. Sylvia rushes to comfort a weeping Elia, explaining she abandoned her medical checkup because she heard her sister was injured. The father offers hollow praise for Sylvia's kindness, but Elia bitterly points out that the doctor has been left waiting outside without treating Sylvia. Looking at the sickeningly fragile girl, Elia grimly notes that Sylvia should obviously be receiving medical attention before anyone else. Overwhelmed by self-loathing, Elia fiercely recoils from Sylvia's embrace, screaming at the pure girl not to touch someone as broken as her. Despite the vicious rejection, Sylvia stubbornly holds onto her sister and questions why their parents are just standing around doing nothing. Sylvia gently inspects Elia's bruised face, horrified by the bleeding and demanding to know who dared to hit her. Staring into Sylvia's soft face, Elia tragically remembers that even during her darkest days at the brothel, her stepsister was the only one who never gave up on her. Sylvia embraces her tightly, vowing that she truly cares, even as Elia tearfully confesses to stealing her precious tea. Her father violently interrupts the tender moment, commanding Elia to get her filthy hands off Sylvia immediately. A dark wave of jealousy finally breaks inside Elia, and she screams at Sylvia, demanding to know why her sister is always the one who gets to steal what is rightfully hers. She bitterly resents that Sylvia effortlessly receives the boundless love of their parents and even the affections of Soleil, taking everything Elia ever wanted. As her father screams her name in fury once more, Elia completely breaks down under the suffocating realization that Sylvia is endlessly surrounded by the happiness she will never have. Stepping forward with burning authority, the woman fiercely commands her mother to stop, declaring that she has done enough. Looking at her kind, beloved sister crying so helplessly, she realizes with painful clarity that her own life would be infinitely better if they could just walk hand in hand. Reaching out with a blood-stained hand to gently cradle her sister's face, she desperately confesses how she always wanted to love and cherish her. The crushing weight of reality sets in as she admits to herself that she simply could not love her. Tears stream down her face as she apologizes to Sylvia, haunted by the memory of their dying mother who admitted she felt no affection, terrified that she is exactly the same. Embracing her tightly, Sylvia softly reassures her sister that everything is all right and that she has known this painful truth for a long time. Tears spill from Sylvia's gentle eyes as she offers unwavering comfort, repeating that everything is truly fine. Her eyes widen in profound shock as she stares blankly, realizing that her little sister truly understands everything she has been hiding. Staring down at her trembling hands, she numbly acknowledges the stark reality that she is entirely covered in blood. A doctor abruptly interrupts the grim scene with an urgent warning that the girl's life is in danger, clicking his tongue in frustration after having politely waited in the hall. As the doctor firmly states that letting her die from blood loss would be inexcusable, she tries to gently guide her bewildered sister back to her room. Instructing Sylvia to stay put, the older sister tries to lead her away, deeply disturbed by how gentle Sylvia remains despite the horrific events. She desperately tries to push her sister away by reminding her of her cruel words, but Sylvia calmly agrees with their father not to disturb the doctor. The older sister demands to know why Sylvia remains so composed, reiterating the painful lie that she could never love her. Observing her sister's pure and youthful demeanor, she experiences a sudden epiphany about why Sylvia would say such comforting things. She reflects on Sylvia's isolated life in the mansion and her harsh transition to the academy, realizing her sister had no friends and was completely abandoned by the one person she should have relied on. Surrounded by strangers at the academy, the lonely girl naturally turned to Soleil because he was the only familiar face she knew. Realizing that Sylvia can finally stand on her own without relying on her, the older sister silently accepts that it is enough. A melancholic realization settles in as she accepts the bitter truth of her existence from the very beginning. She silently accepts the crushing reality that she has always been completely alone. The scene shifts to a bright bedroom where Lady Marianne checks on Ilya, gently asking how she is feeling now. Dismissing the injury as just a few stitches and a passing fever, Ilya casually confirms to her concerned visitor that the scar will most likely remain. Lady Marianne winces at the mention of a blade wound, noting that such injuries inevitably leave nasty scars regardless of their depth. Evading further probing, Ilya softly explains that the details surrounding her strange injury are quite difficult to explain. Marianne hesitantly voices her concern, warning Ilya that high society generally frowns upon any scandalous violence involving blades. Warning of the countless rumors a noble lady's combat injury will stir, Marianne presses to know Lord Soleil's reaction to the debatable violence. Ilya admits she wrote to inform Soleil of the injury but doubts he will break the engagement over it, noting they are scheduled to meet later today. Staring at her bandaged arm, she reflects on how she has desperately clung to her role across countless lives, terrified she might lose it all in an instant. Her trembling fingers nervously stroke the fabric of the bedsheets as the weight of her anxiety sets in. Swallowing the heavy truth she desperately wanted to confess, she forces a smile and simply tells Lady Marianne that she is fine. Sitting intimately by the bed, Lady Marianne leans in and softly reminds Lady Ilya that this private moment is the perfect time to share a secret. With a conspiratorial glimmer in her eye, Marianne raises a single finger to her lips in a silencing gesture. Marianne earnestly pledges that she still means her previous offer to do absolutely whatever it takes to help, prompting Ilya to confirm she certainly remembers the generous promise. Recognizing Marianne's formidable pedigree as the foremost line of a count's house capable of making most things happen, Ilya questions why her friend won't simply ask why her help is needed. Smiling warmly, Marianne dismisses the need for explanations, declaring her firm belief that a person should be allowed to blindly devote themselves to a friend at least once in a lifetime. Standing solitary in her memories, Ilya reflects that across her numerous repeating lives she has never had a friend speak so generously, nor does she believe she deserves such unwavering loyalty. Acknowledging her own cynical upbringing in noble society, Ilya quietly confesses to Marianne that she barely understands the concept of friendship and severely doubts it truly exists. Unfazed by the doubt, Marianne gently counters that she understands love, firmly believing that all forms of love, including the devotion offered to a friend, require absolutely no reason. Ilya notes that Marianne's innocent declaration makes her sound as if she has never seen true darkness, just as Marianne officially offers her love as a loyal friend. The warm, sunlight-born words fall like a shining droplet into Ilya's dried, vaporous heart, visibly moving her just before Marianne politely announces she must take her leave. Mentioning that Lord Soleil will visit soon, Marianne insists Ilya shouldn't suffer the pain of standing to see her out, earning a quiet note of gratitude from the injured girl. Pausing dramatically at the heavy doorway, Marianne calls out Ilya's name one final time, prompting the girl to look up. Staring back with a heavy gaze, Marianne cryptically warns that there are inevitable times in life when things happen that are simply beyond our control. Marianne philosophically notes that while some claim destiny can be altered, true destiny is defined precisely by its inability to be changed, leaving Ilya visibly stunned. Processing the chilling words, Ilya mentally distinguishes between cold, unfeeling fate that cannot be avoided, and true destiny, which represents the events that absolutely must not be avoided. A sudden flutter draws Ilya's sharp gaze to a black bird perched at the window, sparking the terrifying realization that Marianne had been speaking as if controlled by an unseen force. Reaching out toward the window, Ilya desperately asks if Marianne knows the ominous bird's name, noting that its eyes are an entirely different color than a normal crow's. Observing the bird's unervingly deep gray or blue eyes, Ilya questions the very existence of a creature so unnaturally black as she wonders if it knows her true name. Recognizing the crow as a harbinger of ill omens, Ilya is haunted by the memory of an unavoidable tea party from a past life where she inadvertently brought two fated people together. She remembers learning the harsh lesson that fate cannot be altered when their inevitable meeting triggered a hellish punishment, leaving her to question what terrible sin she originally committed. His cruel words cemented the painful conclusion that her repeating life is entirely meaningless, crushing her simple, desperate wish to finally be happy. Ilya grimly realizes her personal hell began when she selfishly dreamed of standing beside her love, effectively trying to tear apart two people firmly bound by an unbreakable fate. Staring into the night, she agonizes over why she alone is forced to endlessly repeat time to face this unavoidable destiny, suddenly questioning if that rule is actually absolute. The intense philosophical reverie shatters as Marianne innocently asks what is the matter, completely oblivious to Ilya's internal panic. Ilya physically recoils in shock, causing a startled Marianne to cry out her name in sudden alarm. A wave of horror washes over Ilya as she realizes she has been making a terrible mistake this entire time, barely hearing Marianne ask if she is all right. As Marianne frantically calls for help, Ilya realizes her previous assumptions were just chaotic guesses born from the despair of her constantly repeating life. Forcing herself to focus, Ilya urgently demands to know exactly where Sylvia is, immediately noticing how clearly rattled Marianne becomes as she nervously claims ignorance. Pressing the frightened girl, Ilya sharply asks what happens if someone manages to avoid a destiny that absolutely must not be avoided. Marianne stares back in genuine, puzzled confusion and asks what she is talking about, proving to Ilya that the previous profound speech about destiny has been entirely erased from her friend's mind. Reflecting on her punishment, she wonders if twisting fate and defying a god's will has cast her directly into hell. Apologizing to Lady Marianne, she abruptly excuses herself, stating that she must leave immediately. When a flustered maid asks where she is going, she resolutely declares she is heading to see Sylvia, completely certain that her sister is not actually in the manor. Trusting her sharp instincts about her sister's whereabouts, she completely ignores the maid's cries and rushes off to follow her. She realizes the stage is finally set when she is informed that Lord Soleil has arrived and has been waiting in the guest room for quite some time. Noting that everyone has a specific role to play in guiding the story to its end, she mentally prepares herself to face Lord Soleil. Sitting inside a carriage with a visibly cracked window, Lord Soleil stares at her and firmly demands an explanation. Captivated by his icy blue eyes, she listens as he points out that she is clearly still recovering. When he questions if she should even be outside, she cryptically admits that she is neither completely fine nor entirely unwell. Unconvinced by her vague answer, he frowns and bluntly states that she does not look all right to him. Seeking to hide the turbulent ripples in her heart, she avoids giving a straight answer and simply insists that she must go somewhere no matter what. Apologizing for her abrupt departure despite his visit, she climbs into the carriage beside him so they can hear each other better over the noise. Without a word, he gently reaches out and takes her hand in his. Noting her pale, shaking form, he worriedly asks if she has a fever while giving her his complete, undivided attention. Basking in his intense gaze, she heartbreakingly admits to almost mistaking his concern for genuine affection, a foolish illusion she knows all too well. Feeling the rough, work-worn texture of his palms, she listens as he gently tells her that upholding just one thing will be enough. Familiar with the feel of his hands from past dances, she realizes she never truly understood the relentless, grueling training he endured to become a knight. Overwhelmed by regret, she reflects on how selfishly obsessed she used to be with maintaining her proper image and proving her worthiness to stand beside him. Casting aside her pride, she stares intently into his eyes and begs him to absolutely protect her sister no matter what happens. Taken completely off guard by her selfless plea, he repeats Sylvia's name in sheer confusion. Startled by her sudden intensity, the ever-polite gentleman demands to know what she is trying to do and what on earth she expects to happen. She reminds herself that it is only natural for a gentleman to bring a recovery bouquet to a sickbed, even without any underlying affection. Looking down at the bouquet, she notes the tragic irony that he chose a pure arrangement of entirely white flowers. Acknowledging that offering a sick person white flowers is usually reserved for the dead, she secretly treasures the gesture because he deliberately picked them just for her. A small, bittersweet smile touches her lips as she remembers him once confessing that white was his favorite color and these were his favorite flowers. Pushing past his polite excuses, she directly questions if checking on her recovery is truly the only reason he came to her house today. Having previously hinted that their engagement might be dissolved, she deduces that his unannounced visit means he wants to deliver his final answer in person. Meeting her gaze, he gently assures her that there is absolutely nothing she needs to worry about regarding their situation. He explains that while her letter lacked specifics, her recent behavior made it obvious something was weighing heavily on her, prompting him to speak with her face to face. Promising not to press her about the complicated reasons behind her injury, he offers her the time and space to explain everything only when she feels truly ready. Recalling her past lives, Ilya tells herself over and over again that they have as much as they need. Hearing those words from Soleil, Ilya admits that it sounds as if that is enough, while he questions why she would say something like that. Ilya's face darkens as she contemplates the end. Ilya tells Lord Soleil that she doesn't want to deny herself anymore, stating that a single event can't wipe everything clean because all those layers make up the person she is now. She states that none of that can be erased, and the stage is prepared for Sylvia. Pleading with him, Ilya begs him to save Sylvia, emphasizing that she only has him. Soleil shakes his head, stating that he can't simply do as she wishes when he doesn't understand anything she's talking about. Placing a hand on his chest, Ilya insists that his very soul should already know what he must do precisely. Ilya stares intensely as he falters. Soleil questions what is wrong, stating that she doesn't seem like the Ilya he knows, and wondering what happened to her personality. Ilya wonders where he got the idea that she isn't the Ilya he knows, noting he wouldn't look at her like that. Ilya tells him it almost sounds like he is the one searching for her. She insists that she is only herself, the one from before the tea party and before she began repeating time, and she's been there from the start. She abruptly states that he just said it. Soleil reassures her that of course she matters because she is his fiancée, and she asks if he'll grant her wish. Ilya tells him there's something she must tell him about Sylvia's birth and parents, asking if he will grant it. She contemplates that while it might not be right to reveal someone else's secret, she doesn't think it's wrong either. She plainly states that someone is trying to kill Sylvia. What she remembers is a ribbon stained with blood. It seems Sylvia went to the theater that day on a sudden impulse to get some air, making the unscheduled outing unpredictable. Ilya deduces that if someone had suggested Sylvia take a break, her sister, who had been bedridden, might have gladly followed that advice. Naturally, she was the one who gave the driver the destination when she ordered him to take the fastest route possible, suggesting they avoid the city and take a detour. Arriving at the destination, Soleil looks curious and asks what business she could possibly have in a place like that. She observes that he looks angry at first glance, but he must be shaken about what is supposed to happen to Sylvia. She realizes that for him, this must feel like a bolt from the blue. Despite him only just reaching the threshold of adulthood and being a student, Ilya notes that his gentlemanly composure shows how much they were crafted. She concludes that this is why he was drawn to Sylvia. Soleil asks how she knows that Sylvia is being targeted. Ilya admits she sounds like a fortune teller because all she can say is that she simply knows, but insists that Sylvia being targeted is a fact. He gently replies that it's not that he doubts her word. Ilya nervously asks Lord Soleil if he is armed, noting that even students in the night course rarely carry a sword, to which he hesitantly confirms his attendant usually holds it. Despite her sudden and strange behavior of taking a discreet street cab without a valet, she desperately wanted him to carry a weapon. Staring at the man holding her hand, she realizes just how odd this entire situation has become. She internally questions if this man walking beside her is truly the exact same person from all of her repeated past lives. Although she kept her time looping a secret in the carriage, she told him everything about Sylvia's parents and the true nature of the fashionable society novel without holding back. Even though her story must have sounded like a baseless delusion, he simply asked what she needed him to do, prompting her to beg him to protect Sylvia. When he questions what she will do, she firmly states that Sylvia is the one in danger, not her, making him seriously doubt if everything will really be all right. Looking at the ominous footprints ahead, he nervously asks her what kind of expression she is making and if she actually knows what lies ahead in the darkness. She bitterly recalls a past life where she was seized immediately after her sister's death, dying in a dark cell after being falsely declared the culprit. She remembers how Soleil, the only one who could have uncovered the truth, condemned her to the harshest sentence because he mistakenly believed she acted out of pure jealousy. His intense love for her sister and his deep hatred for Ilya completely clouded his eyes back then. Standing in the dark forest, she admits that from her second life onward she did everything possible to prevent the incident, meaning she never actually learned what truly happened on the day Sylvia died. She explains to Soleil that Sylvia's carriage was overturned and the maid killed in a staged robbery, but her sister was deliberately dragged deep into the forest just ahead. They share a tense, silent look as if bracing themselves for the inevitable nightmare waiting in the shadows. Recognizing that this terrifying stretch of time is dangerously critical, she realizes this is absolutely no time to slow down. A sudden, desperate scream for help violently shatters the forest silence, causing them to panic. Soleil brandishes his sword and shouts for Ilya to get back as they urgently rush forward to save the screaming Sylvia. A mysterious figure steps into view, casually expressing his pity that they actually made it in time to interfere. Ilya freezes in absolute shock as she recognizes the smiling boy standing before them, gasping out his name in utter disbelief. Remembering him as Saiyan Otopiarch from their first meeting, she desperately demands to know why he is doing this, but he cryptically replies that one single line could never explain it all. Saiyan calmly justifies his actions by declaring that he also has something precious he fiercely wants to protect. He coldly tells Ilya she should have just stayed at the manor until she died, confirming that the missing maid and the overturned carriage were meticulously orchestrated by him. Pausing his taunts, Saiyan realizes they might not actually know the full situation and questions if they truly understand what is happening with little Sylvia. Seeing the knowing look on Soleil's face, Saiyan chuckles and deduces that the knight already understands the grave danger currently threatening their country. As Sylvia desperately cries out for her sister, Saiyan explains that the queen's recent death sparked a massive succession crisis, making Sylvia's sudden step into the spotlight a huge problem for the divided nation. While praising Sylvia's adorable voice, Saiyan firmly orders her to be quiet before someone aggressively commands him to put the girl down. Observing Saiyan immediately obey the command, Ilya realizes with dawning horror that the boy is not actually the one running this deadly operation. A shadowy figure emerges, explaining that the late queen's younger sister was actually Sylvia's mother, finally bringing the deadly political problem to light. The mastermind coldly declares that Sylvia's mere existence poses a direct threat to the country, justifying their brutal actions. Concluding that the young girl simply had to disappear, the figure chillingly reveals that there are not just 3 of them standing in the dark forest. Breaking the tense silence, Sai demands that the hidden figure reveal their face. As Soleil and Ilya look on in shock, Sai casually asks his friend if he minds telling him something. With a dark expression, Sai asks Soleil exactly how it feels to be betrayed by a trusted friend. Reflecting on her past lives, Ilya realizes that when Soleil's lifelong friend Edwald told her half-dead self in prison to give up and die, it was actually an act of mercy. Because her memories of writhing in pain until she collapsed were terribly hazy, she suddenly wonders if that was what Edwald truly meant back then. As the heavy fog in her mind finally begins to lift, a horrifying realization dawns on her. She recalls how Edwald had visited her with her sister's bloodied ribbon in hand. She remembers him dropping the ruined ribbon and telling her to rest easy because her sister would be waiting for her in the afterlife. Unable to piece her chaotic thoughts together back then, she now realizes Edwald must have been present during the supposed bandit attack to possess such a keepsake. The chilling parallel hits her as she realizes the current ambush perfectly mirrors that fateful day. Noticing her expression, Sai smirks that she has already figured it out, while a bewildered Soleil demands to know why he is there. Gripping his sword tightly, Soleil stares down the dark path and asks if Sai truly betrayed them. Stepping forward beside Edwald, Sai explains that humans will ruthlessly discard anything to protect what they truly value, constantly choosing one path while destroying another. Ignoring Soleil's confusion, Sai notes Sylvia's deep violet eyes and remarks on their familial resemblance while Edwald holds the young girl hostage at sword point. Unable to bear the tension, Ilya screams at them to shut up before desperately begging Lord Saiyan to explain his motives. Sighing in annoyance over their limited time, Sai reluctantly explains that the childless queen's death forced several distant candidates into the succession race, including his own brother-in-law. He grimly reveals that if the rapidly growing abolitionist faction seizes the wavering throne, every royal affiliate will be violently purged. Drawing his blade, Sai declares that to survive, his brother-in-law must mercilessly erase every obstacle in his path. Pointing his weapon forward, Sai states that his brother-in-law's only remaining option is to seize the crown. Because Sylvia's hidden bloodline makes her the strongest heir, Sai admits her existence is a fatal threat, prompting Edwald to press his blade closer to the terrified child's neck. Without warning, a sudden, sharp motion slices through the tense air in the forest clearing. Sai fiercely barks out a warning, completely rejecting the sudden interference from the shadows. Soleil steps forward with his sword drawn to defend them, while Sai casually notes that their desperate resistance changes nothing. Analyzing their stances, Ilya realizes the student Soleil is completely outmatched by Sai, whose background in intelligence likely gave him real combat experience. Watching the former friends clash, Ilya wonders if the two boys who once laughed together in the academy dining hall ever imagined this tragic outcome. Meeting Soleil's blade, Sai reveals he repeatedly tried to guide his friend toward a peaceful path by urging him to choose Sylvia over Ilya. As their swords violently lock together, Sai claims his past manipulation was actually a desperate attempt to orchestrate a peaceful resolution. He explains that marrying Sylvia into the Marquis household would legally sever her from his country's succession, saving her life and avoiding needless bloodshed. Ilya suddenly understands that if Sylvia had just remained a quiet, sheltered lady instead of attending the academy, this tragedy could have been entirely avoided. Flinging his arm back in bitter frustration, Sai laughs darkly at the irony of providing them an escape route they completely ignored. Gripping his bleeding arm, Lord Soleil stumbles back as Ilya cries out his name in horror. He confesses to her that if it isn't her, there was never any room for him in his heart. Overcome with emotion, Ilya realizes she never needed to worry about his true feelings at all. Brandishing his sword, Edwald coldly apologizes and reveals he was never on their side as Soleil furiously accuses him of betrayal. When Ilya asks if he cares about his family, Edwald cryptically replies that calling his actions a betrayal isn't quite right. Explaining that his family wouldn't tolerate a traitor, Edwald quotes that humans will do anything for what they cherish and swears he won't betray a friend. Recognizing his fatal resolve, Soleil deduces that Edwald is fully prepared to die for this admirable friendship. Dismissing the act of dying for a brother-in-law as foolish and childish, Soleil declares that playtime is finally over. Pointing his blade forward, Edwald casually calls out to Soleil before making his final stand. He wistfully admits that they might have actually been friends if they had been born in different countries. Accepting the grim reality, Edwald states that this tragic clash is simply a part of their destiny. Flanked by armed assassins, he declares that this confrontation is another unavoidable kind of fate. Swinging his sword with deadly intent, Edwald coldly reminds them that fate cannot be defied. Soleil barely blocks a sudden strike from an assassin while Edwald praises the perfect timing to exploit their tangled relationship. Stepping closer to the clash, Edwald confidently notes that covering up this assassination will be incredibly easy. Ilya watches in dread, realizing Edwald is fully prepared to dirty his own hands to protect what he holds dear. As an assassin sneaks up behind Soleil, Ilya recognizes the terrifying depth of Edwald's unwavering resolve. The assassin brutally slashes Soleil across the chest, causing Ilya to scream his name in absolute terror. Edwald casually commends Soleil for managing to strike down the assassin despite sustaining such a grievous wound. Mocking Soleil's struggle to remain standing, Edwald notes he is pushing his limits while Ilya panics over what to do next. Frozen in desperation, Ilya desperately tries to figure out a plan while recalling the grim warning of an omen-bearing bird. Suddenly, Sylvia arrives on the battlefield, leaving both Ilya and Soleil utterly stunned by her unexpected appearance. Barely maintaining his footing, Soleil mutters Sylvia's name, instantly prioritizing the young girl's safety. Gripping his heavy sword, Edwald expresses genuine pity, wishing they could have met under different circumstances. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Soleil furiously charges forward to clash blades with Edwald. Edwald's eyes widen in shock as he barely manages to block the incredibly heavy strike. The two men engage in a brutal, spark-filled struggle as they push against each other's blades. Ilya screams in terror as the intense, life-or-death battle pushes both combatants to their absolute limits. In a blindingly fast maneuver, Soleil decisively thrusts his sword straight through Edwald's chest, ending the fight in a spray of blood. Turning back with a gentle expression, Soleil assures Ilya that he never doubted her word, leaving her to silently wonder if the nightmare is finally over. Gripping a sharp dagger with a dark, terrifying glare, Saiyan suddenly reveals that his true target is entirely unexpected. The lethal blade slices through the air, hurtling directly toward the terrified and completely defenseless Sylvia. Moving with desperate speed, Ilya throws herself into the path of the flying weapon, violently taking the brutal strike squarely in her own chest to protect her sister. Saiyan throws his head back and barks a manic, unhinged laugh, mocking the utterly ridiculous and pathetic display of sisterly sacrifice. Panting heavily and bleeding profusely, Ilya struggles to stay upright as the immense pain finally begins to rip through her trembling body. Collapsing heavily to the ground, Ilya ignores his cruel taunts about the relentless assassins and firmly resolves that this must end now. While Sylvia and Soleil scream her name in utter horror, Ilya forces out the desperate command that Sylvia absolutely must be placed under the impenetrable protection of the Marquisite's power. Soleil desperately yells her name in panic as Edwald finally arrives on the chaotic scene, covered in blood but ready to fight. Ignoring her sister's heartbreaking pleas to stay by her side, Ilya sternly commands Edwald to drag the weeping Sylvia away so she can speak privately with Soleil. Soleil falls to his knees and desperately gathers her bleeding, broken body into his trembling arms, his face completely pale with raw terror. Ignoring his frantic, desperate promises to immediately fetch a doctor, Ilya softly calls his name as a sickening throb of pain violently racks her fading body. Gasping for breath, she urgently begs him to leave her behind to die, warning him that Saiyan's dangerous men might still be lurking in the deadly shadows. Horrified by her grim request, Soleil fiercely refuses to abandon her, violently rejecting the very idea of leaving her to die alone in the dirt. Smiling peacefully as her senses completely fade to nothingness, Ilya begs him with her last ounce of strength to protect Sylvia before she voices one final, desperate request. Trembling violently with overwhelming grief, Soleil violently refuses the cruel request, stubbornly clinging to her fading body as if his sheer will could keep her alive. Gently reaching up to touch his tear-stained face, Ilya forces him to look directly into her dying eyes and accept the brutal reality that she is already gone. She softly reminds the weeping knight of his heavy duty to the market, firmly telling him that he absolutely must choose the best path forward despite his agonizing protests. Staring deeply into his devastated eyes, she quietly brings up the painful, unspoken truth that he never actually loved her at all. Ignoring his stunned confusion, she gently confesses that the feeling was completely mutual, finally acknowledging the tragic lack of love between them. With unwavering resolve, she looks directly at the broken man and clearly states that she does not love him. She internally admits that these harsh words are merely a necessary lie meant to forcibly harden his resolve and sever the heavy chains binding his heart. Repeating the heavy lie one final time, she ensures her words shatter whatever lingering guilt might hold him back from moving forward. Despite her noble, self-sacrificing intentions, Soleil instantly recognizes the blatant lie and violently tightens his desperate grip on her failing body. Realizing her end is mere seconds away, Ilya intensely focuses all her remaining willpower on permanently burning his weeping image into her fading memory. She desperately hopes that memorizing his face will somehow allow her to carry this profound, fleeting moment into whatever mysterious void awaits her beyond death. A sudden, haunting realization strikes her as she suddenly understands exactly why her mother stared at her so intensely during her own bloody final moments. The chilling puzzle pieces finally snap into place as Ilya realizes her mother's refusal to close her eyes was absolutely not an act of cold indifference or hatred. A profound sense of peace washes over her as the stunning truth finally breaks through the decades of bitter misunderstanding. Tears slip from her dying eyes as she realizes her mother's silent, unblinking stare was actually a desperate, unspoken declaration of pure, unyielding love. Smiling softly as the light entirely leaves her eyes, Ilya finally understands that the intense gaze was the absolute highest form of love a dying person could ever offer. Reflecting on her mother's clumsy attempt to save her, Ilya turns her fading attention to Lord Soleil. Staring up at the shocked young man, Ilya firmly tells him to go while reminding him of his solemn promise that she mattered to him. Collapsing into Soleil's desperate embrace, she begs him to protect Sylvia and never let go of her hand. Pressing her face against a trembling Soleil, she declares this as her final wish while the assassin's knife remains deeply lodged in her back. As her vision rapidly blurs into darkness, Ilya gently asks the devastated boy holding her if he is crying. Unable to hold her fading form any longer, Soleil slowly lowers Ilya's severely wounded body to the cold ground. Staring up at the pale full moon, Soleil's face contorts with a silent, overwhelming grief. With a chilling, defeated calm, he quietly permits Sai to take Sylvia away. While a horrified Sylvia screams for her bleeding sister, Sai acknowledges Soleil's broken choice and prepares to leave the scene. Tears streaming down her panicked face, Sylvia finally realizes the absolute truth that her older sister truly loved her. Looking back at Ilya's fallen body, Sylvia cries out that her sister taking the lethal blow was the ultimate proof of her devotion. Overcome with heartbreaking clarity, the young girl screams to the heavens that she finally understands the true meaning of love. Weeping uncontrollably, Sylvia confesses her own deep love for her sister while rejecting the tragic reality of her sacrifice. Slipping deeper into unconsciousness, Ilya desperately hopes that her violent final act can truly be considered love. Closing her heavy eyes, Ilya silently apologizes to Sylvia for finding a selfish satisfaction in this sacrifice. Swallowed by the pitch-black void, she bitterly laments that she never once managed to become the righteous, worthy woman she desperately wanted to be. Despite her profound regrets, she finds a small sliver of peace in knowing Sylvia finally felt genuinely loved. Just as she accepts that her cursed life wasn't entirely in vain, a mysterious voice suddenly echoes through the darkness to announce it has finally found her. An unknown entity reaches out across the infinite void, respectfully addressing the dying girl as its princess.